Gordon and Artura waited outside a building, wondering why Marge was taking so long to come out after learning only one skill. Inside, Marge seriously studied a book in a room filled with notes and papers. He was an S-rank member of the Silver God's Blade, whose main ability was transferring skills to teammates. Ilya and Tina waited in the cold hallway, complaining about the delay. They were also experienced S-rank members of the Silver God's Blade. Artura was a vanguard with Holy Blade, Eagle Eye, and Attack Boost. Ilya was a sorceress who used Ancient Wisdom, Rapid Reading, and Automatic Mana Recovery. Gordon was a Royal Guard with Obsidian, Grip Enhancement, and Firm Stance. Tina was a support priestess with Angel's Feather, Spirit Boost, and Prolonged Battle. Despite their powerful team, Marge was considered the weakest member. Marge possessed only Skill Transmitter, allowing him to transfer learned abilities to others. He spent years studying in a training room that gradually became a storehouse of knowledge, though his teammates believed the team already had enough skills. Alone in the room, Marge remembered his teammates calling him useless and saying they no longer needed him. Then he wondered whether the time had finally come. 3 years earlier, after defeating a dungeon boss, Marge suggested learning more skills before challenging an A-rank dungeon. However, Artura stopped listening to his advice. In the present, Marge approached the door. When Marge came out, the others looked irritated. He said he had finished and asked them to come closer so he could transfer the skills, ignoring their complaints. After saying he needed to act carefully, Marge announced that he would transfer all 12 skills he had learned and again asked everyone to come closer. Marge began the transfer and asked everyone to choose their desired abilities. A glowing list displayed all the skills he had learned. He activated skill transfer, forming magic circles around his hands as energy flowed through him. All 12 selected skills were successfully transferred to the 4 members. The system confirmed, skill transfer complete. The others celebrated their new strength and left together, while Marge went alone. As usual, no one thanked him, despite his studying all night without eating. In the dining hall, Marge received the party's order but noticed he was given old bread and barely anything to drink, while the others ate meat daily. A teammate reminded him not to oversleep before tomorrow's departure. The party entered the S-rank dungeon, Magical Abyss. Artura activated Holy Blade and ordered everyone not to interfere, while Marge was warned not to hinder the group. Suppressing his anger, Marge imagined using Holy Blade to destroy those around him, venting his resentment only in his thoughts. Eagle Eye's enhanced reactions allowed Artura to use many transferred abilities. Skills grew stronger through SB, and at the maximum value of 999,999, they evolved into new forms. Skill transfer was a rare ability that let Marge give his own skills to others. However, abilities like Attack Boost reached far greater power in Artura's hands than in his own. Marge spent his days studying to remain useful, believing the transferred skills depended on him. Once welcomed as someone with a divine gift, he was now treated as a porter and avoided by the party. The team advanced easily through the legendary Magic Abyss. Monsters and traps posed little danger, but its poisonous creatures had killed many unprepared parties. Marge knew their success depended on his transferred skills and proper usage. When mocked, he stayed close because the abilities would stop working if they moved too far away. Even 3 steps of distance would break the connection. Though he could let them collapse from the toxins, Marge continued protecting them despite their contempt. Since traps were randomly generated, Marge reminded Artura to use Scout's Premonition. She blamed him for not providing a clearer skill and decided he would not be paid. Artura activated Scout's Premonition and sensed something enormous. Marge hoped her mood improved, knowing he usually received less than 1/10 of the reward. Then he noticed a door on the right. The 5 approached a massive engraved door and realized it led to the boss room. Previous parties had always lost comrades there. Marge knew their preparation had mattered, though no one acknowledged it. The group confirmed it was the boss room and prepared to proceed. Instead of ordering everyone aside, Artur asked for a plan and suggested sending Marge inside to scout. Marge anxiously asked whether he had to enter alone. The others treated it as obvious, and Artur coldly asked who else would do it. Marge questioned how this would benefit the team. Artur called him annoying, while Darge reminded him that refusing violated Guild Rule 17. Even an S-class party could not ignore guild laws. A member asked how long Marge had been with them, and he answered 7 years. Guild rules required compensation for every year served if a member died, meaning his death would earn the others a large sum. Darge was shocked that Arthur would break guild rules for profit and asked Tina, Gordon, and Elia whether they agreed. Marge was stunned that his longtime comrades supported getting rid of him. He reminded them that without him, their transferred skills would stop working. Arthur called Marge a burden and claimed that clearing the dungeon without him would officially make them an S-class party. Marge realized they wanted him dead for their own benefit. They planned to replace him with a first-class alchemist and live in luxury. Marge calmly agreed, but first demanded the return of every skill he had transferred. They mocked him and said the skills would disappear after his death. Marge remembered he only needed to use the return command. He reversed skill transfer and ordered all abilities to return. The skills began leaving his teammates and flowing back to him. Energy surrounded Marge as each skill returned to his body. Once the process ended, he became their sole owner again. A faint female voice confirmed the retrieval. Though the process was slow and painful, all his abilities were returning, and Marge remembered the debt his former teammates still owed him. During retrieval, Marge demanded payment at 10% interest every 10 days, reminding them these terms were set during the original transfers. Since he had transferred skills for years, Marge demanded the full debt with interest. The others finally realized how much they owed him. Elia apologized and asked him not to hold a grudge. Marge explained that the debt used compound interest and had grown over time. He clarified that interest was repeatedly added to the increasing total, causing the debt to grow rapidly. Elia mocked Marge, offered only 10 points, took his supplies, and pushed him toward the boss. After calculating the interest, she realized the debt multiplied tenfold in a year and became enormous after 2. Thanks to ancient wisdom, Elia quickly calculated the total and turned pale. Arthur coldly ended their relationship with the words, "Ciao, Darge." Arthur then kicked Marge through the boss door, which began closing behind him. The others walked away without looking back. Elia tried to stop them, but the door shut, leaving Marge alone with his returned skills. The system confirmed the recovery of Eagle Eye, previously held by Arthur, and began collecting the enormous accumulated SB. The interest exceeded 100 trillion. Though shocked by the amount, Marge knew those who underestimated him would soon regret it. Marge activates a safety mechanism and enters a guaranteed area. Alone but calm, he notices he is completely naked and prepares to move forward. After an explosion, healing magic restores Marge inside a mental space where only his consciousness exists. A voice confirms his brain is unharmed, revealing that the system has intelligence. As recovery nears completion, Marge realizes the system predicted everything, including the lost time. Before he awakens, it tells him to use his knowledge only for good. The entity reveals that it always observed through their eyes as an unnoticed member of the S-class party. Its final hope is that their new power will not be misused. As his body reconnects with his brain, Marge feels drained after retrieving every skill. Before waking, he asks the hidden entity for its name. Opening his eyes, Marge sees the name Ko appear in the bright space and quietly repeats it. After discovering the dungeon invasion, Artura proposes killing Marge immediately. Elia hesitates, finding the decision too cruel. Elia argues they should not casually discuss murder, especially since the boss may kill Marge anyway. Weakened, Marge tries to object. Struggling to breathe, Marge whispers about Angel's feather, but the skill does not activate. Panic rises as his body stops responding. Marge awakens in darkness before the boss attacks. His wounds have healed, all skills have returned, and his power has greatly increased. After recovering, Marge's abilities evolve. Eagle Eye becomes Divine Eye, Instant Dash becomes Cosmic Leap, SB Recovery becomes Inexhaustible, and Attack Boost turns into Destructive Power. With his restored strength, he prepares to fight. At the center of the hall stands Vritra, a gigantic dragon filling almost the entire arena. Its terrifying presence marks it as Marge's final opponent. Vritra spreads deadly poison throughout the dungeon, making any approach fatal without protection. Marge must defeat it to escape. Since ordinary weapons are useless, Marge activates Cosmic Leap to cross the deadly distance in a single move. He then activates 6 arms of Ashura, creating 6 powerful arms that increase his attacks and allow him to defend from multiple directions. When Vritra attacks, the 6 arms grab its body and violently throw it back, briefly disrupting its assault. The impact destroys the ground, but Vritra rises completely unharmed. Marge realizes an ordinary attack cannot kill it. A system window asks whether he wants to advance. His SB has reached 116,144,339,696%, an amount his brain cannot withstand. The overflow will be used to settle the debt, requiring him to choose a skill for confiscation. Marge selects Ilya's Wisdom of the Ancients. After confiscation, it evolves into Divine Aaron and becomes connected to every member of the Silver God's Blade, linking their abilities to their existence. Ilya's SB falls to -99,999,999, activating full confiscation mode. The system can now seize all her SB, skills, power, and even part of her consciousness to repay the debt. Using Divine Arya, Marge accessed knowledge from the distant past and mastered ice magic. Arya Termination reduced energy consumption, while Attack Enhancement evolved into Underworld Rift through skill synergy. Marge formed an ice sword and struck Vritra. The cold cracked its body, stopped its regeneration, and shattered it in a single blow. However, one fragment continued moving. Vritra was still trying to regenerate, though the ice magic had sealed the process. Marge leveled up and range increase evolved into Limitless Infinity. Cosmic Jump allowed him to cross any distance and travel anywhere in the universe. He considered escaping to a point thousands of years away where the dungeon boss could never find him. With Limitless Infinity, movement depended only on his will. The dungeon collapsed and the boss disappeared, confirming victory. Marge sensed something strange after taking a fragment of Vritra's body. He discovered Vritra's egg and decided to raise it properly. Since only Vritra could defeat Vritra, he carried the egg to the Sea of Stars, where it would awaken in 2,000 years. They activated Cosmic Jump and left the dangerous area. After being thanked for his help, Marge used his cooking skill to prepare food. Only one member escaped the collapsing dungeon. On the surface, Marge cooked hot soup and finally felt safe, though he knew his journey was not over. Marge received a reward and compensation for saving the team. After officially leaving Ardor's party, he rested in a private room and finally felt at peace. Marge thanked Ko for protecting him and offered to give her a physical body. Ko wished to become a beautiful girl for his sake, and he accepted her request. Ko admitted she wanted to touch him with her own hands. Marge knew skills could not create life from nothing, but he had noticed another possibility. He decided to use the second debt. If he created a body first, he could later transfer Ko's consciousness into it. Skill return activated, beginning the next collection. Tina's Angel's Feather was confiscated and evolved into Fire Angel's Benefaction. Marge used it to create a divine body for Ko. He synchronized Ko's personality and consciousness with the new vessel. Magic formed the girl's body in midair. When Marge opened his eyes, Ko lay alive in his arms. She was warm, breathing, and fully awakened. Ko thanked him for giving her life and asked to call him Marge, though she still preferred addressing him as Master. She then shyly asked whether she could consider him hers. Ko realized she was naked. Marge, having forgotten to create clothes, hurried to cover her. He gave her spare clothes, which pleased her because they smelled like him. Marge then began restoring and enhancing their weapons, armor, bodies, and healing abilities. Marge explained that they needed to leave the city and find somewhere to raise Vritra. Since Ko had no experience with people, he warned her to be cautious, and they decided to start a new life elsewhere. Raising his sword, Marge toasted the frozen dragon and activated Holy Blade. He noted that Ardor and Gordon still possessed wisdom of the ancients and Angel's Feather, then vowed to reclaim everything taken from him. Arthur toasted the frozen dragon and activated Holy Blade, wondering why the boss's body was missing. Drunk, he blamed Marge's betrayal for ruining their victory celebration. Arthur complained that he could not master borrowed skills. The others argued that learning even 10-20 skills took years and doubted Marge could have become powerful enough to defeat all four of them. The rescue team had found them a week earlier, while Marge had disappeared 3 days before they awakened. The boss room was frozen and contained dragon remains, and Marge had reported the victory before vanishing. Sake aggressively questioned the girl, demanding to know whether she had noticed anything strange. She calmly avoided the question and began praising the food, suggesting they dip the bread in corn soup. Arthur called the situation absurd and criticized Ilya's messy eating, doubting the intelligence for which she was famous. Darge explained that the second prince developed the road after the previous war to prevent conflict. Travelers now paid taxes for its maintenance and protection. The road connected many cities and remained crowded. Darge added that barriers and settlements also collected taxes, while funds were needed to defend against monsters. Hunting monsters brought loot and supported the growth of cities like Kinui. He observed that solving one problem always created another. She agreed, noting that zombies, night hounds, and other monsters made nighttime travel especially dangerous. They wondered whether magical creatures would attack ordinary people. Although Darge could use jump, he chose to travel normally so the silver-haired girl could learn about the world. Darge explained that skills depended on creativity and combined space jump with star frost around the tent. The synergy would detect approaching monsters, but their numbers forced them to hurry toward the city. Kinui was a hotel city filled with inns, shops, equipment, and provisions for travelers. Built along a major road, Kinui was lively but mostly served as a temporary stop. Street vendors sold fried sweets and other treats. Darge saw a man berating an exhausted animal-eared maid and refusing her food until she finished working. Disturbed, he asked the master about her race. When the girl stood, her ears and huge tail made Darge realize she was a werewolf. He remembered that werewolves once lived in forests until humans seized their lands and drove them out. After the war, the forests here were cleared and Duke Abig settled the territory. The Essa forest inhabitants were known for thick fur, sharp claws, fangs, and great endurance. However, the girl looked different from the fearsome race described in legends. After finishing her work, the girl was insulted as a useless dog and given food. She silently accepted the abuse with her head lowered. Her meal consisted of watery broth and stale bread, the same poor food Darge once received in the Silver God's Blade. Seeing her condition, he decided that saving her might require bold action. Darge resolved to stay for another 10 days and speak with the owner about helping her. While the girl ate, a man ordered her to carry flour worth 3,000 in to the warehouse, saying he had already spoken with her master. She silently accepted the task. While the tailed girl finished eating, a man angrily complained that she was being charged 300 in for terrible food and expected to move an impossible number of flour sacks in one day. Watching the ragged girl, he doubted she was ordinary. Despite her appearance, her eyes held the strength described in ancient legends. Realizing his attempt to help had become complicated, he explained that the job paid 3,000 in but demanded 600 in return. If she followed his instructions, she could earn far more. He said she would normally last only 10 seconds and ordered her to finish by tomorrow. Learning she possessed a short-lasting leg-strengthening skill, he offered to extend its duration for weeks. He calculated that she could earn half of the 3,000 in after food expenses if she completed the work by tomorrow. Since she was literate and capable, the deal would benefit them both. The girl warned that he would receive nothing if she failed. He agreed, asking only for 1% of the borrowed points and confirmed that the deadline was tomorrow. She accepted and called him master. After choosing a skill, he activated skill transfer. During the transfer, a voice introduced itself as Marge. The girl repeated the name, realizing it would provide additional assistance. She introduced herself as Shizuku. Marge selected enduring strength, allowing her to maintain her enhanced power much longer. Shizuku received a sweet as a sign of friendship and extra points that extended the skill's duration. Marge then asked whether she was rested and ready. Someone questioned why Marge demanded payment instead of helping for free. However, Shizuku proudly ran to work, showing that she would not accept charity. The heroes were surprised that Shizuku had already finished moving sacks heavier than herself and gone to collect her pay. Her skill would remain active for 10 more days, so Marge began searching for more work. Since Shizuku was strong and literate, they believed she could find a better job and quickly develop her abilities. After receiving the promised 600 in, they said goodbye. As the heroes prepared to leave, they unexpectedly noticed Shizuku nearby and wondered why she was still there. At the bar, Arthur complained that they might starve without the boss reward. The party blamed Bar for reporting the dungeon cleared while they remained poisoned, though he argued that they had ordered him to contact the guild. The guild had summoned them after hearing rumors about a magical creature captured in unexplored darkness. Learning that Duke Abig's spouse was involved, they believed this opportunity would help them reach S rank. The Silver Blade of the Gods refused to accept weak members and hoped to form ties with Duke Abig. They remained convinced that removing Marge was the right decision. One member decided that mentioning Holy Blade would be enough, though Angel Wings had also been omitted. While ordering steak and meat, he silently promised Marge that he would not let their guild collapse. Using Marge's borrowed skill placed extreme strain on the body. Arthora's holy sword allowed near-light-speed movement, but Eagle Eye would disappear after 10 minutes. He was then startled by the appearance of Marge and Shizuku. Marge explained that the root vegetable was emergency food but had become poisonous. It could only be made safe by soaking it in clean water for a long time. Seeing Shizuku eat the poisoned root despite recently being paid, Marge realized she was still starving. He asked Ko to watch her while he investigated her employer and missing salary. The employer admitted paying Shizuku only 600 yen instead of the promised 3,000. He added 5 more days of work, deducted 1,500 for lodging, and blamed damaged sacks despite her finishing everything in one day. Shizuku received only 600 yen instead of 3,000, while 300 yen was deducted for scraps. The landlady reduced her pay, added workdays, and invented damages, leaving her no choice but to eat poisonous roots. Although Shizuku completed the work in one day, they refused to pay her properly because she was a wolf cub, revealing their discrimination. Seeing someone treated like him, he finally understood why even his former companions had tried to kill him. He realized they had always planned either to drive him away or kill him without paying. Their betrayal destroyed his faith in people and justice. He reflected on people who lacked empathy and found satisfaction only in exploiting and destroying others. Such people united only for profit, using false concern to exploit the kind and naive. This realization became an important lesson for him. The man called Shizuku a mutt and demanded payment for the lesson. Darge told him to extend his hand and activated Heavenly Rift. As the man reached for a coin, a hidden blade severed his wrist. The coin then embedded itself in the wall. The man weakened from blood loss while Darge calmly retrieved the coin. Darge held up another coin, saying it represented what Shizuku should have been paid, and coldly ordered the man to take it. The man screamed over his severed hand. Darge calmly reminded him that Shizuku had been forced to eat poisonous roots while he had never cared. Darge realized people like this only understood force and decided to make the man experience his own cruelty. Meanwhile, proud Shizuku still intended to keep her promise. The man claimed werewolves had no dignity and did not deserve payment. Darge replied that he had every right to intervene because Shizuku had been cheated. Darge declared that he would protect Shizuku because he had granted her the skill based on the promised payment. Human or wolf, a contract had been made and he would collect the debt. He reminded the man that he had reduced Shizuku's pay from 3,000 yen to 600 and warned that his remaining limbs could also be taken. Holding the severed hand, Darge threatened to repeatedly dismember and heal him until he understood the price of betrayal. Witnesses watched as Darge threw the man from the window. The injured man tried to crawl away while Darge coldly looked down at him. Darge said he was not bluffing and suggested the man start talking before losing more than his right arm. Shizuku arrived as the man's body regenerated through Fire Angel's blessing. The destroyed office was visible from the street, and a sudden knock increased the tension. Shizuku confirmed that she was fine despite slight poisoning. Since Angel Wings had been returned, she avoided serious harm. Darge had hidden her underground before the others entered. The man admitted cheating Lady Shizuku and was ordered to pay her wages, medical compensation, and damages for illegally extending the contract. He handed her coins worth 10,000 yen and 100 yen. Shizuku returned the excess payment, refusing to become like the man who had deceived her. She wanted only what she was rightfully owed. Darge accepted the coin and activated 6-armed Usura. 6 ghostly arms restored the office's walls, ceiling, and furniture. Standing among the ruins, Darge clenched the coin and coldly told the man to choke on it. He launched the coin into the man's forehead, where it embedded itself with tremendous force. The man collapsed in agony. Darge calmly declared that they were now even. Darge told him they owed each other nothing, said farewell, and left. Jaren rose furiously and ordered his subordinate to summon Overseer Aldaro immediately. Ko suggested Shizuku buy new clothes and wash herself now that her wages had been returned. They bought Shizuku an elegant dress and visited a bathhouse where Ko helped her clean herself. Shizuku finally felt safe and refreshed. In her new dress, Shizuku looked graceful and feminine. Ko praised her appearance, leaving her embarrassed but pleased. Shizuku shyly asked whether the clothes suited her. Her companions assured her the dress looked beautiful. When asked why she had tolerated her former master despite her strength, Shizuku explained that fighting back might have left her without food. Shizuku refused to use strength for personal gain, believing honor mattered more than money or victory. She said she only fought when someone was in danger or needed help. Darge admired her inner strength. Darge realized Shizuku would never surrender, even under harsh conditions. Proud of her wolfman heritage, she promised to use her strength for anyone who needed her. Darge sensed about 40 armored soldiers approaching, led by Shizuku's former master, who had returned for revenge. Realizing a fight was inevitable, Darge and Shizuku silently prepared to face them together. Darge suggested using sustained strength, but Shizuku confidently refused. Though she had only 2 skills, her true power came from her resilience and spirit. Darge revealed that he knew Shizuku's hidden strength increased the longer she fought, though its normal limit was 10 seconds. Uncomfortable that he knew her secret, she prepared to reveal it. Shizuku stepped forward and called upon the spirits of her ancestors for strength. Her endemic skill, Werewolf Shell, fully awakened. Bestial energy surrounded her body, forming claws, fangs, and a powerful ancestral aura. Shizuku released overwhelming power that cracked the ground and damaged nearby buildings. Her activity level reached the dangerous maximum of 10, terrifying the soldiers. Facing them, Shizuku asked whether they had come for Marge, money, her, or their lives. They mocked her and declared they would take everything. An attacker charged, but Shizuku crossed the distance instantly and sent him flying with a controlled strike. She calmly offered to teach them a lesson. Her next blow smashed another opponent into the ground. Shizuku looked at the rest and coldly counted, first. Shizuku defeated them one by one without using her claws. Darge realized she was showing mercy by refusing to kill them. Standing among the fallen enemies, Shizuku deliberately avoided using her claws. Her precise strikes were not revenge but punishment, meant to ensure no one suffered as she had. Her past silence came from helplessness, not consent. Years of abuse and exploitation made others mistake her kindness and patience for weakness. Despite her exhaustion, Shizuku rose and struck with overwhelming speed and power, shocking everyone who had considered her useless. Watching her, Ko could barely follow Shizuku's movements even with divine eye. Her speed defied physics, revealing a rare endemic skill. Skills learned from books were ordinary, but unique abilities came from a person's character, beliefs, and essence. Divine Eye allowed Marge to recognize such gifts. Mana moved through the world like a living force, changing climates and creating magical regions. People born there could awaken unique skills that reflected their souls and could not be copied. This land's ancient earthly mana gave birth to a powerful spirit skill linked to the werewolves. Their strength, speed, and endurance increased the longer they fought. Shizuku's unique skill was Fanged Wolf. Upon activation, her power reached 905, making her faster and stronger throughout battle until she became nearly unstoppable. Shizuku stood trembling from the growing power inside her. The master realized she was pushing herself too far and losing control, but no one dared approach. Darge knew little about Shizuku and could only wonder why she had come to this city and what she truly wanted. Shizuku's fury and pain erupted as her activity level rose to 4064, shaking the air and ground. She demanded the return of everything stolen from her. She wanted back her dignity, lost time, and identity. Darge and Ko activated spatial jump and left, trusting her to handle the rest. When the one-armed man reappeared, Darge and Shizuku were already waiting. Darge coldly reminded him of his hidden arm and helplessness. The man tried using spatial jump to reach the arm hidden beneath the building, but Darge predicted it. Shizuku warned that a slight mistake could make him teleport into stone and die. Shizuku now had enough power to destroy the entire house. The terrified man tried to mock them, but every escape route meant death. The girl he once considered worthless now terrified him. Darge ordered him to remain still, promising to restore his arm after he obeyed. Detecting the hidden arm, Shizuku's activity level rose to nearly 90,000. She declared that she would not let the man die and would save him as promised. 3 days later, Marge silently prepared to leave. Elsewhere, someone whispered that this was already the 14th person who had spoken to him. After Shizuku defeated Jiren and his gang, 40 mercenaries were found dead. Rumors spread that Jiren had declared war on an adventurer and been killed, quickly turning the event into a legend. After defeating Jiren, Shizuku became famous throughout the city. People approached her with questions, admiration, and wary respect, while Jiren's former influence turned into contempt. Shizuku found money, valuables, documents, and property in Jiren's estate. Though uncomfortable taking criminal wealth, Darge argued that it had originally been stolen from the locals. The recovered fortune totaled about 631,000 in. When asked about his guild income, Darge explained that difficult missions paid more but also required heavy expenses. Darge decided to spend the money in Kinui rather than remove it from the small city and damage its economy. He planned to reinvest it for future opportunities and emergencies. Shizuku struggled to find any good memories of the city, but Darge praised her strong will and advised her not to dwell on the past. Shizuku vowed to remain herself and move forward. She told Darge that she would find a way to make him happy, leaving him confused by her words. The three arrived at Lino's jewelry store and confirmed it was their destination. The prestigious store sold valuable gems, making it easy to spend hundreds of thousands of in. Shizuku admitted it was her first time visiting such a place. They entered the store and were welcomed by the owner. Shizuku was surprised to learn that she would also receive a gift. Darge ordered items for all three, and the total came to 7.47 million in. The saleswoman explained that the pendant contained a rare stone called werewolf, once worn by a princess. It stored heat mana and changed color like a glowing amethyst. She confirmed it was a special type of amber with endemic mana. Recognizing Marge and Shizuku, she gifted the valuable pendant to Shizuku, saying it suited a half-werewolf. After leaving the store, Marge led Shizuku into a quiet alley and awkwardly thanked her away from prying ears. Shizuku told him she came from a hidden werewolf village and invited him to visit her homeland. She revealed that Ao no Seihate contained a secret S-rank dungeon with over 40 floors, where one could earn the title of king. Holding Marge's hand, Shizuku confessed that her village was in danger and begged him to save her people. Meanwhile, Artora's team traveled in a luxurious carriage, joking about their aristocratic appearance and enjoying the unusual journey. They were heading to control an impregnable S-class dungeon. Such expeditions allowed adventurers to impress nobles and compete for the title of king. One member had reserved the carriage to arrive before the others. Though Tina was nervous about Lord Bick watching them, the team remained determined to participate. Despite the rough road, the driver claimed the carriage would not spill any tea. When accused of deceiving them, he laughed and said they had already left the city. Artura declared that he had spilled alcohol on his new armor due to the coachman's fault. The coachman, with a frightened voice, apologized and loudly drew attention to the monsters that had appeared, expressing alarm that they were right on the main road. Indeed, boars had appeared on the road, which caused additional vigilance. He disdainfully called these creatures small fry and ordered Gordon to approach and check the situation. Gordon, feeling unwell, refused and apologized. Turning to Ilya, Artura remarked that he didn't understand how she could sleep with such noise, but decided he was too lazy to wake her. He confidently stated that he would handle the situation himself, as he was capable of defeating even 10 A-rank beasts, and now there were only 2 in front of him. He regretfully added that if he were S-rank, he would have annihilated them instantly without expending a drop of effort. After that, he activated a skill called Holy Blade and prepared to attack. At the moment of impact, he was unexpectedly thrown back as if power had surged out of control. After his attack, only one boar remained alive and he himself felt a sharp pain. He was surprised that he hadn't been able to recognize the enemy's movement, despite having Eagle Eye active. He noted that when using Holy Blade, he should always have clearly seen the opponent, even at high speed. However, at that moment, he couldn't distinguish anything and concluded that he might have had too much to drink. Realizing his state, Artura admitted he had been drunk, but now he had sobered up and was obligated to destroy the remaining monsters. Activating Holy Blade again, he focused on the fight and successfully killed the last boar. Despite this, his body was thrown back again, which caused irritation and alarm. He yelled in fury, expressing dissatisfaction that the situation was repeating itself and couldn't understand why this was happening. Marge's words about his skills returning resurfaced in his memory, causing an internal protest. He rejected the thought, repeating to himself that it was impossible and couldn't be true. At the same time, he clearly understood that he had to demonstrate his holy blade technique before Duke Abek. There was only one day left until the dedication ceremony where he was supposed to do this. In the arena, the man acting as the host announced to the assembled crowd that the participants of the Silver God's Blade would now perform and demonstrate their martial arts. He urged the spectators to enjoy the battle, in which the participants would break through the filthy devil's abyss. In his thoughts, Artura noted that he had received a rare chance to prove himself and realized that he had no right to fail. He emphasized how important it was to show proper tactics so that Duke Abek would acknowledge his strength. His ambition to join the ranks of the aristocrats depended on a successful performance at this demonstration. The man in the arena continued, announcing that the Silver God's Blade would release monsters proposed by Artura, and that safety measures had been provided even for an A-rank squad. Artura noted to himself that even without Eagle Eye, he could strike vital organs, which would give him an advantage. He also reminded himself that the monsters he had chosen had hard shells and would continue to fight even if decapitated. These monsters were an army of about 50 ants. Gordon yelled at Artura, suggesting they greet the audience before the battle began. Artura quickly caught on and thanked everyone who came to watch their fight against the monsters. He promised a spectacle of destruction, crushing, and plenty of blood. After that, he quietly told his allies to remain silent and try to gather as many monsters as possible in one place. Gordon, a little scared, confirmed that he understood the instruction. The man in the arena commanded the members of the Silver God's Blade to prepare and announced the start of the martial arts demonstration, opening the monster cage. Gordon activated his obsidian skill and cursed in frustration, realizing the seriousness of the situation. Artura confidently accepted the challenge, activated his holy blade, and rushed into battle. However, he was unexpectedly thrown back, crashing into the wall with a dull thud. The spectators watching the events unfold reacted with surprise to his failure. Gordon anxiously asked him what was happening and why Artura couldn't fight. Feeling the strangeness of the situation himself, he admitted that he might not be in his right mind and swore that he wouldn't mess up next time. Activating the Holy Blade again, he tried to repeat the attack, but the result was the same. He was thrown aside once more. He gasped, saying he didn't understand what was wrong or what was happening. Tina, concerned by what she saw, called out his name, wanting to intervene. The crowd began to loudly discuss the situation, wondering why Artura was failing despite the power of his blade skill. Someone reminded them that the Eagle Eye skill had been borrowed by Artura from Marge, and perhaps he now had to return it. However, it was immediately clarified that Marge had lent completely different abilities such as speed reading and magical power. The crowd recalled that he had shared various skills with different people, including Lord Gordon, and even mentioned Artura's debt of 10 gold to Tina. The consensus was that after what they had seen, it was clear Artura had lost the Eagle Eye skill, and that was the reason for his failure. Someone confidently declared that the Holy Blade had lost its power and expressed shock, as it was unbelievable. After all, they were talking about a member of the Silver God's Blade. The crowd began to discuss that the Silver God's Blade was Marge's former party, and this fact proved that the entire strength of the team members depended completely on him. Gordon ordered Tina not to delay, and to immediately restore Artura using her Angel's Feather skill. Tina stumbled but still tried to use her magic, chanting the activation, Angel's Feather. The spell didn't work and the girl panicked, admitting she didn't understand why her power wasn't working and what she might have done wrong. Gordon, losing patience, told her to stop crying and called out to Artura again. In response, he smiled weakly, noting that it seemed Aaliyah's wisdom had finally returned. Aaliyah intervened and emphatically stated that this was not the case. Artura looked at her in surprise, not understanding what she meant. Aaliyah explained that ancient magic was simply impossible at the moment, but she promised to help and protect him right here and now. She offered to use her saliva, claiming it would help him recover. Artura reacted with surprise and disbelief, expressing his confusion about what was happening. Gordon loudly shouted, urging everyone to destroy the remaining enemies, but at that moment, his voice broke into a cry of pain. Fighters from the A-class squad and the Duke's army came to their aid, neutralizing the enemy with their combined efforts. Thus, this unprecedented and difficult battle finally came to an end. A whole week had passed since that bitter and disappointing encounter, filled with tense silence and a sense of despair. Artura's mind raced, tormented by the question of why all of this was happening to him, finding no comfort in the surrounding silence. Ilya, assessing the situation, noted that everything had indeed taken a catastrophic turn. Tina hadn't been seen for several days, and Gordon hadn't left his room the entire time, as if plunged into deep despair. She wondered if things were really that bad. Artura mentioned that a few days ago he had sent a letter to the Duke requesting a personal audience, and if that request had been accepted and considered, perhaps they would have had even a glimmer of hope. He then asked Ilya if the butler had arrived yet and how much time had passed since then. Ilya, flustered, tried to determine the time by the phases of the moon, looking up at the sky, but she ended up completely confused by her own calculations. Suddenly, the butler appeared, announcing that he had come with a refusal on behalf of his master. He discreetly explained that his master was extremely indignant at the contents of the letter received from Artura, and then politely asked him to accept the refusal. Artura couldn't control his emotions and demanded an explanation for why the butler was returning the letter, as he had every right to know why things had turned out this way. To this, the butler remarked with cold dignity that Artura could satisfy himself by rereading what he had written, as the reason for the refusal was contained within the text. He exclaimed with disbelief that, in his opinion, everything was perfectly fine, and called what was happening a betrayal. The butler remained unperturbed and clarified that Artura seemed to be fine, but he had simply misunderstood the essence of the matter. His master dislikes unfounded conflicts. He is a reasonable and merciful man, and therefore even forgave Artura's thoughtless action. This remark provoked even greater anger in Artura, and he noted that what was happening was beyond all reasonable bounds. Ilya, at that moment, thought to herself that everything said was a lie. Meanwhile, the butler continued, clarifying that Artura had performed terribly and should realize his current situation himself. However, in 2 or 3 months, he could try sending a letter again, and then their request might be considered. Artura couldn't believe what he heard and wondered how someone could allow themselves to say such words. The butler, as if anticipating his feelings, explained that he understood human nature and knew that Artura was not one to give up. However, he noted that the master was convinced Artura was in the wrong. He recounted personally observing Artura and witnessing how failures plagued him every step of the way. Most importantly, Artura used a forbidden technique twice. He was stunned and asked in surprise what that second instance meant. The butler confirmed it was true. Artura had used the forbidden holy blade skill twice. Artura was confused and demanded an explanation as to why this skill was considered forbidden, accusing the master butler of completely misunderstanding the situation. The butler calmly explained that the holy blade was a high-speed attack impossible for the human eye to perceive, and the result of such an attack was always obvious. Artura, in his thoughts, indignantly noted that he didn't understand what the butler was talking about or what nonsense he was spouting. The butler, meanwhile, calmly added that using such a skill carried severe penalties: imprisonment, torture, or the gallows. It was for this very reason that he had come in person to deliver the news. The master did not wish to press charges for what had been done. He understood that Artura was still too young, which made him act impulsively and without considering the consequences for his own life. Artura, seizing the opportunity, begged for at least one chance. The butler, after considering his request, stated that if a natural disaster, rebellion, or act of disobedience occurred, Artura must immediately report it to him. He was obligated to control what was happening, and if such an event transpired, they would meet in person. After these words, he apologized and departed. Ilya, left alone with Artura, sadly stated that they had been completely rejected, and now there was no hope left. Artura, consumed by despair, exclaimed that this man was a true bastard who had ruined everything. He admitted that it was a complete collapse and everything had fallen apart because of Marge. In his thoughts, he reviewed all the consequences of what had happened. Ilya had lost her ability to use magic, Tina had lost her healing powers and vanished without a trace, and Gordon, though alive, was severely wounded, his body and nervous system so ravaged by the army ants that he was temporarily paralyzed. Artura's chance to become a nobleman had completely failed, and all of this happened because of the holy blade. Clenching his fist in a surge of determination, he suddenly remembered the alchemist, the brilliant Angelina. Marge had been thrown out of the equation, but not all was lost. Much could still be changed. Elia doubtfully reminded him that they were forbidden from leaving the city, and such an act could lead to severe consequences. However, Artura, brimming with internal resolve, declared that he didn't care about the aristocrat's opinion. He was convinced that two geniuses were destined to meet and could solve all their accumulated problems. Artura believed he would prove his strength as the god's sword to everyone, and they would be able to change everything. He mentally challenged those who claimed he had a narrow worldview. Meanwhile, Angelica regretted not arriving at the guild before sunset, but she promised herself that she would definitely be there tomorrow morning. She was filled with impatience for the next day. She couldn't wait for the moment she would finally meet the one called the God's Sword. Marge announced the start of the loan repayment process for the duration enhancement skill, which Shizuku had temporarily possessed. Shizuku regretfully prepared to say goodbye to her fully unleashed wolf technique. However, Marge reminded her that while the loan period expired today, the technique itself was still active. He added that if needed, he could lend her the duration enhancement skill again. Shizuku noted that she could still use the wolf technique for another 10 seconds. At that moment, Ko informed them that Shizuku still had the duration enhancement skill, and her current SB count was 1242. Shizuku was surprised, and Marge explained that the skill had become her own without any extra effort. Shizuku was confused and wanted to understand what this meant, and Marge promised to explain everything in more detail on their way to the next task. Meanwhile, an elderly man approached them, introducing himself as Mayor Kinui. He asked Marge for a favor. Marge invited him in and inquired about his request. The mayor directly stated that he wanted Marge to deal with the monsters that had been surrounding Kinui for the past few months and were becoming increasingly aggressive. Marge noted that they too had been attacked by monsters on their way, about 80 of them which he had put to sleep. The mayor continued, explaining that as mayor he was obligated to act, and so he had hired 40 mercenaries, but now all of them were unconscious. Marge dryly remarked that it was his group with Shizuku who had defeated those mercenaries that night. The mayor admitted that the fault lay with the mercenaries themselves, but emphasized that the threat from the monsters hadn't disappeared. Of all the mercenaries, only Marge was still on his feet. Ko turned to Marge, asking what she should do. Marge pondered, noting to himself that the task was unexpected but not directly related to their original goal of saving the werewolf village. He addressed Shizuku, pointing out the unusually high number of monsters in the vicinity of Kinui, and suggested it might be connected to the labyrinth. Shizuku agreed with this theory. Marge reasoned that if there were so many monsters, the journey to Makabo would take at least half a year. This indicated that low-level monsters were making their way to the surface. He concluded that even if they managed to capture the labyrinth itself, the monsters on the surface wouldn't disappear. Therefore, he considered it necessary to clear the area as quickly as possible before they could even think about a replacement. He simultaneously activated Scout's intuition and Divine Eye and determined that there were 104 bodies nearby, many of which were monsters. He also noted that thanks to his skill, which ignored defense, the enemy's numbers didn't matter. He uttered the word slicing, clearly activating an attack, and suggested they continue their discussion about skills on the way. After that, he asked an important question: how Shizuku had managed to learn her skills. He explained that this was all part of the skill acquisition mechanism. Shizuku repeated, "Mechanism?" Marge began by explaining that a skill could only be used if the user had at least 1000 SP special points. Without this minimum amount, usage was impossible. There was no easy way to earn those first 1000 SP. It required constant learning, ability development, persistent training, and effort. That's how he himself once mastered the skills that were later used as part of Ardura's team. Once a skill was put into use, SB would gradually accumulate and strengthen. Some abilities only developed after reaching a certain threshold. According to Marge, his skill borrowing system directly depended on SB. Essentially, he wasn't just borrowing abilities, he was transferring SB. If the usage period was set for 10 days or more, he could transfer as much SB as he wanted. However, there was a strict limitation. Skills could only be borrowed from one person, and only if that person genuinely possessed them. For example, if a resistance skill was transferred to someone who also had healing abilities, they would be able to apply resistance to other people as well. But even if someone possessed 100 million abilities and only 1000 SB were transferred to another, the remaining 99,999,000 still had to be used personally. Of course, it would be convenient to give 1,000,000 SB to 100 people, creating a full-fledged army, but there were conditions here too. The interest rate was 10% for a 10-day period. This meant that if you borrowed 1,000 SB, you had to return 1,100. To develop more skills, they needed to be used as often as possible. Shizuku cautiously asked what would happen if she couldn't increase her SB. Marge replied that in such a case, a deduction would occur, -100. This implied that there were also negative effects. If you borrowed 1,000,000 SB, you would need to earn 100,000 within 10 days. He reminded her that the speedreading zone had been applied to over 1.2 million people in 6 years, and with such numbers, repaying the debt would become practically impossible. He also mentioned the existence of a negative SB limit. If this limit was reached, other SB would also begin to deplete. He was surprised that there was even such a phenomenon as negative range in SB. He hadn't known about it before and preferred not to delve into it. Internally, he vowed that he wouldn't take anything from Shizuku that would make repayment impossible. He had a minimum term set, and for this very reason, Shizuku needed to use the transferred abilities within 10 days. He asked if she now understood why the duration increase effect didn't disappear even after the debt was repaid. Shizuku was a little surprised. Then Marge suggested that perhaps she used the wolf technique whenever she had free time outside of battles. Shizuku replied that she tried to conserve SB, but she was curious how long the transferred resource would last. Considering her use of the duration increase skill, she had accumulated 2,342 SB, and if she returned 1,000, 1,242 would remain. Marge confirmed that she was correct. Shizuku then asked about the other skills. However, Ko abruptly cut into the conversation, rudely stating that paying off one debt with another was a behavior typical only of foolish and uneducated people. Shizuku was a little flustered and awkwardly admitted her mistake. Marge watched Shizuku's reaction with interest when she noticed that he might want something more than he had already received. Shizuku, showing genuine curiosity, asked how convenient the technique he demonstrated was and what it was called. Marge explained that it wasn't a separate skill, but a combination of 3 existing ones that he had learned to control simultaneously. Ko thoughtfully suggested what if such a skill existed independently. Marge agreed that in that case, it would be one of the most powerful skills. Just imagine how many different situations it could be useful in. However, he added that carrying all the collected materials on his back would be very heavy and frightening. He thanked Ko for her help, and she, in turn, happily noted that she was glad to be useful. Then Marge turned to Shizuku and offered to show her the combination that formed the basis of this technique. He began his explanation with ice magic, specifically the freezing skill, then added space magic, and finally, the magic of the connection between heaven and earth. Shizuku reacted with surprise to the possibility of using freezing in storage, but Marge clarified that it wasn't quite that. He began the demonstration on a small object, noting that much more power was required for full application. Marge created a kind of cavity inside the object, comparable to an egg without a yolk, and sent it into the air using space magic. Shizuku clarified if the object was rising into the sky, but Marge explained that its destination was the sky and beyond, all the way to the area known as the Sea of Stars. He recalled an instance when a person reached this point during an experiment, but unfortunately did not return. However, his notes were found, and from them, it became clear that objects sent there could be preserved in that location for some time. That's where Marge places his materials. He explained that the reason for choosing this particular point was that there was almost nothing there, unlike the Earth and the dungeon, which were overflowing with information. Moreover, it was easier to scan coordinates in this space. Shizuku noted to herself how many nuances needed to be considered. Marge, recalling the advice of a certain person, shared a wise tip: skills should be chosen based on the principle of synergy. He noted in his thoughts that this was precisely the idea that Ardor had lacked until the very end. Without eagle vision and improved felling, and having lost all his skills, it's impossible to create anything truly outstanding. He wondered if Arthur had noticed that all his lost skills had been returned to him. At that moment, Ko reported that a pack of monsters had been discovered to the west. Marge confirmed he understood and invited Shizuku to go with him. She activated her skills, enhanced acceleration and wolf form, 4 days later, when the hired exterminators arrived, all the monsters had already been eliminated. At the mayor's house, Marge asked Ko for help, expressing his trust in her. Ko assured him that he could rely on her. They then went inside, where they were met by a woman who asked the purpose of their visit. Marge hesitated slightly, but the woman quickly introduced herself as the secretary and began to clarify the details. Marge handed her an item, asking her to pass it on to her superior. The woman gasped in surprise, seeing that they were parts of a destroyed monster. Ko explained that they had an agreement for a reward, their side of the conditions had been met, and there were 12 more such parts in the yard that also needed to be counted. The secretary was flustered. She thought that if the guild was involved, a profitable deal could be made, as such trophies were of immense value. Even in the worst case, they were worth several million. Out loud, she only said that she couldn't believe what was happening. Ko, noticing her reaction, discreetly clarified that she wasn't insisting on breaking the agreement, but reminded her that a reward of such a large sum could be a problem for the city's finances. She then suggested formalizing everything as a debt, so as not to demand immediate payment in money, but instead to receive help from the city in the future if such a situation arose. She also requested official documents from the mayor. The secretary agreed, and soon Marge read the prepared document, which stated that for the next 10 years, the city of Kinui pledged to provide financial and other assistance. Marge thanked Ko, expressing his gratitude for her work. Ko replied that she had simply done what she could. Marge sadly noted that he himself wasn't good at such negotiations and wondered if he looked intimidating. Ko disagreed, trying to support him. Reflecting further, Marge acknowledged that although the situation hadn't gone exactly as planned, they had managed to establish a strong connection with the city. He mentioned the abandoned village that served as a demon sanctuary and suggested that the situation there was unstable. If they were to get anything, it needed to be done through Kinui. He added that constant actions of this kind would arouse suspicion, and therefore he first needed to act discreetly. He decided to arrange a meeting at the sanctuary to avoid information leaks. Then he turned to Shizuku, asking if she had changed her mind. Shizuku confidently confirmed her readiness, stating that she didn't want to allow a single death and wasn't going to take what belonged to others. She confessed that she considered Marge's principles to be the most righteous. In response, Marge stated that the losers of war become victims, and if that was the case, he intended to fix everything. After that, he suggested they all go and start developing a strategy that would cover even the farthest corners of the Azure. A voice filled with anxiety and pain spoke of Shizuku, emphasizing that she shouldn't go back because the place was too dangerous. He felt he couldn't die until he passed on important information to her, the name of their enemy. Shizuku recalled the story of the werewolves that her parents had told her. In ancient times, they fled due to a war where all the men fought and died, and only women, children, and those too weak to fight survived. The werewolves found refuge only in this place. The only surviving man of their kind was her grandfather. Marge gave the command to move towards the mountains. The thought of endemic skills, unique abilities that were especially important in these vast territories, raced through her mind. Shizuku continued her story, explaining that the forest was shrinking every year, and with it, the strength of the werewolves was weakening. Because of this, they were forced to flee again and again until they finally hid in places where humans couldn't reach. Ko, hearing the story, repeated that such was the history of the werewolves. Marge noted in her thoughts that they were walking to better explore the surrounding area, but the journey was proving extremely difficult. Something in the air was wrong. It cut at her throat as if filled with invisible needles. Marge commented that the path was tough and asked Ko if she was all right. Ko, though tired, assured her master that she was fine. Meanwhile, Marge couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that no one lived in this area. She doubted whether an S-rank dungeon could possibly be located here. Shizuku explained that the dungeon was dangerous, but they could get meat and useful materials from it. And before they reached their destination, she added that they survived however they could, even using monster blood. Marge became alert, sensing something was wrong, and decided to activate divine vision. He reported alarming news. Everything ahead was shrouded in smoke, and something bad was clearly happening. Shizuku was horrified as there was a strict ban on making smoke in their homeland. This meant something serious had happened there. Marge used gravity and moved to another location. He asked Shizuku where her home was. She pointed the way and then, seeing what was happening, screamed, calling for her father and mother. Marge ordered her to stay put, promising he would get there faster. He activated his six-armed Usura ability and single-handedly annihilated the horde of monsters threatening the village. Ko asked worriedly if he was hurt, to which Marge confidently replied that he was fine and they had arrived. Shizuku activated her armored wolves skill and found her parents unconscious, with severe burns, realizing they weren't breathing. Marge suggested they get out of there as it was becoming dangerous. Shizuku, overwhelmed with despair, asked what they should do now. Marge calmly told her not to worry and activated Archangel's Blessing, a healing skill he had previously used on Garant. He explained that her parents would be fine now, aside from the already healed injuries. Although they had lost consciousness due to the smoke, they should regain it soon. Shizuku cried, thanking him profusely. However, Marge was consumed by heavy thoughts. He pondered how, in this world, the strong only grow stronger, while the weak lose everything and sink into even greater poverty. Marge acknowledged that such cruelty was the natural order of things, but he couldn't accept it. Humanity had, after all, created civilization, culture, and wisdom, all to rise above this. Yet before him was a terrible reality. The dispossessed, stripped of land, family, dignity, even the right to defend themselves, they were even deprived of life. If this kept happening, everything they did would lose its meaning. It would only lead to endless killing, to stand on the bones of a shattered society and proclaim oneself king. If that was the essence of what was happening, then knowledge, culture, society, country, and the very idea of a kingdom would lose their significance. Ko, noticing his state, cautiously called out to Marge. He briefly replied that he was fine. She then asked if he wanted to help the villagers first. Marge quickly assessed the situation and said that demons had started emerging from the labyrinth. Shizuku added that there would be more of them, but it would buy them some time. Marge suggested hiding the villagers on the other side of the village to gain precious minutes. He added that they needed to defeat the boss at the end of the dungeon and asked Shizuku to take care of the villagers. She explained that she needed an endemic skill for that. Marge then decided to lend her the necessary ability and began the transfer process. Shizuku was chosen as the recipient, and the skill being transferred to her was called intuition. It was the ability to sense approaching danger. Shizuku was surprised. She didn't understand why this particular skill, as the enemy was already upon them. Marge calmly replied that intuition was needed to escape. Shizuku was confused, but he explained that she wouldn't be able to do anything in combat and should leave to stay unharmed. Even if only she survived, it would be important. However, Shizuku refused the idea of fleeing. Even if she had to die, she wouldn't retreat, as there was nowhere to run. Marge admitted that he himself had once escaped and survived, even though everything had been taken from him. And he didn't like it either. He didn't approve of such things. Shizuku, looking at him with understanding, said she perfectly understood his feelings. Marge, a bit wearily, explained that he just wanted her to live. That's the essence of human nature. If you survive, you win. Even wild animals think that way, but living solely for survival is the path of animals, not humans. A meaningful purpose is what distinguishes a human from a beast, even if it sounds selfish. Shizuku replied that she understood everything, but despite that, she wasn't going to run away. Marge announced that they would now split into two groups. One would go fight the labyrinth boss and cut off the demon source, while the second would stay to defend the village. He asked Shizuku to take charge of guarding the village until the first group completed their mission. However, before leaving, he repeated his request, saying that if Shizuku could, she shouldn't prioritize her life over others. Shizuku agreed, adding that she herself would never give up her own life for that. Marge promised to do the same. Then Shizuku explained that to reach the area called the farthest corners of Aono Sodo, they first needed to go west, through the village. Marge, saying goodbye, told Ko to hold on tight and assured Shizuku that they would succeed, reminding her not to forget about the village. Shizuku wished them luck in defeating the boss. Marge confidently told her to leave that to them. Shizuku briefly encouraged them, go for it. Marge pointed out that the monster source was to the west. Ko looked at the sky and agreed, determining that the entrance to the area called Blue Thin Threads was indeed on the west side of the mountain. Based on the monster's direction of movement, there was no doubt they were heading there. At that moment, monsters appeared. Marge ordered them to get out of the way. Ko added that this road had been cleared in advance so that villagers could move along it conveniently. It served as a path to the labyrinth. Marge declared that they had reached the end of the blue thread and couldn't waste any time, asking Ko to begin preparations. She immediately agreed. Marge activated the skill transfer technique and began the capture process. A specific skill was chosen and the process started. This was an ability inherited from Gordon, from the moment they captured a creature named Black Day. Then he transformed into what was called Border Vigilance. Ko clarified that the total SB conditional energy or debt of the debtor Gordon had reached the lower limit of 999,999,999. This was the maximum amount of SB that could be restored at the current moment. After this, all incoming amounts would be automatically deducted until the debt was fully paid. Border Vigilance was activated. Marge noted that resisting was now useless. Border Vigilance would repel any attack. It weighed more than lead, and no blow, no matter how strong, could move it. It possessed incredible rigidity and mass. Moreover, when combined with powerful thrust, it could transform not just into a shield, but into a true cannon. All 6 of Usura's arms were fully activated. Acceleration followed, and Marge emphasized that they would attack without delay. Ko again confirmed her readiness. War is nothing more than a race for survival, where the essence is not so much about achieving specific goals as it is about leaving behind offspring. It's not a struggle for spheres of influence or territorial dominance, but natural selection, where the strong prevail and the weak disappear, simply being annihilated. Marge's group pushed forward, reaching the first level of an area called Blue Threads. Marge pondered to himself that humans didn't create culture just to remain forever under the dominion of crude nature. Civilization was built precisely for this reason. This question had arisen in his mind long ago and had bothered him ever since. On the second level of Blue Threads, Marge continued his internal reflections, believing that the human race was truly unique. Unlike other species, humans built civilization. That had to mean something. Upon reaching the third level, he delved even deeper into his thoughts. He mused that living against nature is precisely what makes a human human. War, though it appears bestial, was a result of civilization. It's a matter of survival in the jungle, but he still wanted to understand. What is the true purpose of all these forms we've created? Society, country, state. On the fourth level of Blue Threads, Ko pointed to something ahead. Marge suggested they stop for a moment. Before them stretched a horizon, which wasn't all that rare for S-class dungeons. Ko began to drink water from the horizon, and when Marge called out to her in surprise, she replied that the water tasted a bit unusual but was pure fresh water, no different from surface sources. Marge, bewildered, noted to himself that Ko probably knew what she was doing. Still, he was worried, as there was no telling what might be lurking in the underground waters. He thought that such bodies of water could easily contain poison, but on the other hand, the lake was enormous, comparable to an ocean, and perhaps all the stories about its toxicity were an exaggeration, as is often the case. Starting from a level, landscapes appear. There are even rumors that at S level, people have seen a real sky inside the dungeon. This seemed incredibly strange. The farthest level was considered to be blue, but the very fact that a real horizon could exist somewhere in the labyrinth was astonishing. Ko wondered if they could reach their destination by jumping. Marge immediately dismissed this possibility, pointing out that the distance was too great for a single jump. Moreover, countless bees swarmed above the ceiling, and on the other side was a lake teeming with sea serpents. Passing through all of this was necessary, and multiple jumps would only slow their progress. When Ko asked what they would do, Marge replied that they would need a boat. He activated the art of the underworld and created a vessel. Marge warned Ko to be careful, then activated Vigilant Boundary, started the Song of the Divine Era, began searching for ancient magic, and used the art of Storm Wind Aeolus. They began to move. Ko noticed a swarm of demons appearing ahead. Marge remained calm. He activated the art of Storm and Wind Aeolus, amplified it, and commanded the use of water arrows. If they were on land, tough and armor-piercing spells would be needed, but now on the water, water arrows were perfectly suited. He noted that battle was not their goal, they just needed to break through. Their path led to the deepest level. Ko confirmed her understanding of the order. Meanwhile, in the wolf village, Shizuku's father regained consciousness. He was confused, asking himself what was happening to him. A memory surfaced of a demon attacking their home and he and his wife being inside, inhaling smoke as the building was already burning. However, he was surprised to realize that they were still alive and their burns and wounds had healed. They weren't in their hut. Someone had covered them with cloth and apparently hidden them from the demons. He called out to his daughter. Shizuku was relieved to see her father awake. Still bewildered, he asked how she managed to save them as she couldn't even count past 10 before. Shizuku replied that it was thanks to others. She could now use combat skills and someone she trusted had gone to Blue Threads to stop the source of the demons. Her father reacted sharply. Shizuku tried to calm him, assuring him that the person currently in Blue Threads was capable of handling hundreds and thousands of demons. He shouldn't worry. However, her father explained that the problem was different. Deep within Blue Threads, there was a human, not a demon, behind everything. This person was the one releasing the demons. Shizuku asked in astonishment who it was. Her father replied that their enemy was Duke Abeka. Marge asked Ko how much time had passed, to which she replied that about half a minute had gone by, adding that the expanse was consuming all their time. Marge noted that they should hurry, as the main demon's awakening at the barrier was about to be complete. He suddenly sensed the presence of other people. Noticing the emblems on the shoulders of 4 individuals, he realized they were Duke Abeka's men and wondered how they ended up in this place. Unexpectedly, one of these warriors called out to them, demanding they come out. Marge appeared and stepped out to meet them. One of the men stated that they wouldn't let them pass until they knew who they were and where they came from. In response, Marge introduced himself as Marge Siu, a former guild member. The man asked again with disbelief, clarifying if he was indeed the Marge, owner of the Silver Divine Sword. Upon receiving confirmation, he was surprised and admitted his suspicions were correct. Marge noted to himself that almost 3 weeks had passed since he left, and it seemed the Silver Sword had lost its former glory. Meanwhile, the man mockingly informed him that 3 or 4 days ago, Marge's leader had groveled before their lord, which was a great disgrace for everyone. Marge reacted coldly to this. The man explained that they had tracked the source of the demons themselves, discovered this labyrinth, and decided to seize it without relying on the weak and broken guild. Marge thought to himself that they had indeed decided to act independently, without waiting for the Duke's order. He clarified aloud that they had come here on their own initiative, not by direct order. The man replied that a good leader must use their intellect and take such decisions upon themselves. Marge mentally recalled that Duke Abeka knew about the sharp increase in demons in Kinzi and nearby regions. At that time, he had selected an elite group of fighters from his personal army for investigation, and these were the very people now standing before him. Rumors circulated that the Duke had lost faith in the guild and intended to organize an offensive himself to claim all the glory. Marge clearly understood that this was exactly what was happening now. The man continued with contempt, stating that people like Marge wouldn't understand as he was expelled from the guild because of Ultra. He added that it was especially shameful, considering his S-rank group affiliation. Marge mentally noted that the speaker seemed unaware that he himself had left the guild a long time ago. In response, he calmly said that they probably hadn't reported everything to the Duke yet. The man smirked, stating that he simply had no other choice but to personally lead the attack due to the approaching demon horde. Marge made a mental note that Duke Abeka shouldn't find out about this prematurely. Once the attack was over, they could capture these individuals before they managed to leave the labyrinth. With memory magic, the detainees' memories could be sealed, preventing any information leaks. Ko, addressing her mentor, informed him that Lady Shizuku was waiting for their return alone outside, so they should move on as quickly as possible. Internally, Marge agreed, understanding that there was no time left for extra talk, otherwise it would be too late for everyone. He told Ko it was time to hurry. However, the man from the Duke's squad spoke dismissively, accusing them of being unable to retreat in time and of not knowing how to listen. He grabbed Ko's amulet and ostentatiously threw it away, excusing himself by saying his hand had simply slipped. He mockingly added that if it was a bottomless swamp, they should look for the amulet quickly, or it would soon sink completely, and the most they'd find would be half its former value. Other members of his group watching this began to scoff. They called Marge and Ko a pathetic sight worthy only of contempt, considering them worthless former S-rank group members who had been cast aside. They declared they were leaving, calling Marge an outsider. The man echoed them, saying it was time to prove that true talent lay not in grand titles and regalia, but in real actions. Ko, embarrassed, apologized to Marge and offered to search for the amulet herself so he could continue on his way. However, Marge insisted they would search together. He recalled hearing about the amulet's origin in Kinui. It was an ancient gemstone and considered a sacred treasure of the shapeshifter tribe. Ignoring its loss would be a sign of disrespect. Besides, they had set 2 goals for themselves: to conquer the labyrinth in the shortest possible time and to help the shapeshifters on the surface. Therefore, while those 4 were busy fighting the main demon, it would be much more efficient to find the amulet. He also noted that although the Duke's warriors were overly verbose, they possessed a certain determination and believed they could defeat the demonic king. But such excessive overconfidence rarely leads to success. While the amulet hadn't sunk yet, they needed to search for it together. Ko readily agreed. The man from the team, observing them, expressed surprise that the legendary owner of the silver sword was truly standing before him. He recalled rumors of a genius sorceress girl, a blade prodigy, a former palace gatekeeper, and noted that perhaps these rumors were true. He also complained that adventurers were too easily led astray. One of the girls from the man's team mentally recalled that when she heard about Ultra's disgrace, she also thought Marge's group had lost its former edge. However, she was now beginning to doubt that. Her stealth operation allowed them to hide from the enemy, conserving energy. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to overcome an S-level labyrinth. Yet she couldn't help but notice. Marge behaved completely naturally. He wasn't hiding, and his demeanor remained calm and confident. If you thought about it, even among elite squads across the continent, few could display such strength and composure. The man from the team waved his hand and said it was time to leave these clowns and move on. Their goal was to destroy the main demon. But as soon as he opened the massive door, something resembling giant roots burst out, instantly grabbing almost his entire team, leaving only one of them alive. Overwhelmed with fear, the girl tried to hide, but suddenly felt a tentacle grab her leg. Marge said he was happy to help Kusan. The girl thanked the master. Thanks to the purification skill, the stains disappeared and she felt much better. Marge and Kusan wondered about the demon's status. The young man pondered the strength and confidence of the 4-person group, believing it was time to put an end to this. He was also troubled by the question of whether they had managed to defeat the giant slug. The girl warned her master to watch his step, pointing out the slime on the floor. Meanwhile, the master advised Kusan to step away from the door and keep her face clear. She agreed. Marge, with his arms spread wide, pushed the massive wooden gates open, revealing the passage. Clouds of dust billowed around him from the moving gates. A powerful impact or explosion emanated from the center, creating waves of energy that spread throughout the space. The master's eyes were wide with the power he was wielding. Marge activated Spatial Rift, slicing through numerous roots flying in all directions. A strong, damp smell filled the room, making those present uncomfortable. Not far from the group lay someone's corpse. The master and Ku stood, looking up at the gates as they closed. A bleeding corpse hung in the room. Kusan noted that there should be another one. Soon, they found what they were looking for, confirming their suspicions. The girl sat cowering in fear and called her condition a curse, then clarified that it was a divine curse. Marge asked what that meant. The girl pleaded for help, terrified of the tentacles. The master offered to help the injured girl if she told the truth. In response, the little girl, trembling, began to explain that the platoon commander had initiated the demon summoning, but proof was needed for it, after which the commander released the demons. The young man began to ponder the sensitivity of insect-like creatures to smells, asking how they could be lured out using ointment. He also explained that unauthorized actions in the army are severely punished, and to avoid censure, the commander claimed he had no choice due to a possible demon breakthrough and needed evidence. Now Marge understood why he had brought so many demons. The commander wanted to be knighted, but after everything he had done, this was divine punishment. Marge expressed concern that they had already sent enough demons to destroy the village and that time was running out. The girl reminded him of her help. The master replied that he would keep his promise and asked her to stay put. Before the young man stood an enormous, imposing creature resembling a slug towering over him. Its size was so immense that it filled the entire space. Marge was astonished by its sheer scale. The master stood face to face with the gigantic creature, its tentacles stretching above him, and tension was visible in his gaze. With a determined expression, the young man extended his hand forward and cast the spell Causidus. This powerful attack was aimed at the slug. Marge commented that the situation had become difficult, and Kusan added that they needed to move forward and their best defense now was a barrier. The girl confirmed she could help, stating that with the master's skills, they could even attack from inside the shell. The master asserted that their goal was not to defeat the main demon, and Kusan affirmed this. The girl clarified that their true objective was to conquer this dungeon in the shortest possible time. Kusan expressed relief, noting how lucky they were despite encountering a major demon on the 13th floor. Meanwhile, a massive monster loomed over the master, who was trying to fight it off. Marge was getting ready to activate Spatial Jump, focusing his energy. Kusan and the girl they found watched him, not fully understanding what he was planning. The guy, having risen high into the air, looked down at the girls, who exclaimed how high he was. He was significantly above them, seemingly preparing to jump or fall into a deep hole. The girl exclaimed in astonishment, asking what he was doing, while Marge, concentrating, activated his 6 Usura Arms ability. His arms began to transform, preparing for a powerful attack. The young man, looking determined, told the girl to close her eyes and ears, echoing Kusan. Then, he charged forward. The girl asked what he was doing, while Kusan explained that they were trying to open a hole directly to the lower levels. Destruction continued all around them. A huge black hole opened up in front of the team, with debris falling out of it, and someone exclaimed that it was impossible. This opening apparently led deep down. Someone present noted that they seemed to have already descended to the 14th floor. Another powerful impact or explosion occurred, creating a wave of destruction that scattered debris everywhere. This was the 14th floor, confirming their further progress. After yet another powerful blow, which was accompanied by the destruction of the surrounding area, Marge, with a serious expression, deepened the hole even further. Kusan and her companion watched the events unfold with undisguised astonishment. The girl asked if Marge was really trying to horizontally destroy the dungeon's very structure. Marge descended at incredible speed, tearing through the earth. It turned out he had traveled the long path from the first level all the way to the dungeon's lowest floor. Many had previously doubted such a feat, but he proved them wrong. The ground literally flew apart, forming a massive crater leading deep down. This destructive sight amazed Marge's companions, as dungeon floors were thought to be indestructible. Now, it was clear that wasn't the case. The powerful blows continued, and the dungeon shook with each new destruction. Marge kept going, breaking through layer after layer, astonishing those who witnessed his actions. Even his comrades hadn't expected such a display of strength, especially since he wasn't the leader of the Silver Sword. Kusan and her companion discussed what they had seen, their faces showing shock and bewilderment. It became clear that the master had already left the Silver Sword Guild, which apparently explained his unexpected appearance and incredible abilities. The girl turned to her companion, pointing out what had happened. She didn't mind gossip, but urged her companion to check the facts next time before jumping to conclusions. The adventurer continued to strike, breaking through the ground repeatedly, each time creating an explosive wave. His actions led to reaching the 20th level of the dungeon, as evidenced by the destruction. He kept carving his way through, demonstrating incredible power. Finally, Marge stopped, having reached the end of his journey, and declared that he was finished. He assessed the work done, considering the number of levels that had been destroyed, confirming it was a significant breakthrough. It turned out the dungeon couldn't withstand such a load, and this wasn't a pre-planned breach. Marge hovered over the newly formed chasm while the girls watched from above. They wondered how deep the tunnel went and why it was so quiet down there. Kusan asked the master how things were. The guy descended, announcing that they had reached the dungeon's lowest level and everyone could be congratulated. The girl snapped back and the master asked why. She expressed her confusion and even surprise, noting that people couldn't run on water or fly, even though, as it turned out, they were winning. Kusan asked the girl's name and she replied that she was Miro Valand. The girl explained that while people can't just run on water, there is a way. If you put your left foot forward before your right foot sinks, you can run across the water's surface. Miro cried out that it was impossible, to which Kusan explained that even if something seemed practically impossible, it wasn't entirely so. The master called Kusan. The difference between impossible and practically impossible was highlighted, and this time they had simply crossed the line. Marge and Ku moved forward, rushing towards a massive monster that appeared to be their target. The colossal toad known as the Demon King looked extremely puzzled and upset, according to Kusan. Marge noted that it seemed the monster hadn't expected an attack from above. A huge, pointed boulder loomed over Marge. The guy noted that they didn't have time for the monster, meaning they needed to act fast. Marge declared that he had a friend on the surface who would fight for his return. These words emphasized his goal and motivation, also indicating his connection to the world beyond the dungeon. The colossal toad continued to attack, lashing out with its blade-like tongue. Marge dodged the blows, creating air vortices around himself, which allowed him to avoid direct attacks and direct the boulder at the enemy. A powerful blow pierced the toad's massive body, causing splashes and fragments. The attack created a huge hole in the monster's body, indicating the incredible strength of the attacker. This was the decisive blow in the battle against the Demon King. The werewolf village was engulfed in flames and the structures blazed, crumbling to dust. Shizuko watched the destruction, her face showing shock and incomprehension. What had happened was complete devastation. Above the burning ruins, a giant mantis-like monster appeared, its body covered in a chitinous shell. Shizuko, activating her armored wolf fangs, resolutely declared that she could hold her own in the fight. The girl felt her mana, which she could borrow from her master, was at its limit, and her activity was dropping. She remembered Marge, who had extended her lifespan, and realized she had to defend this land, a land of fertile greenery and beasts that their ancestors had protected. Meanwhile, explosions continued around her, and she had to destroy everything that tried to steal her life and pave the way for her family's life. Shizuko screamed not to say that running away was easy. In her mind, the girl wondered if it was reasonable to avoid the negative and go through it, or if that was a kind of life. Shizuko, fending off attacks, convinced herself not to think about escaping, simply because she could. Shizuko declared that she couldn't call a person who simply breathes a human. Marge understood this and gave her a skill so she wouldn't have to run away, which indicated her deep connection to him and his influence on her fighting path. The girl continued to fight, fending off numerous attacks, demonstrating her resolve. She was confident that Marge, being strong, would be able to conquer the labyrinth. This conviction gave her strength in battle as she awaited his return. Many mantises attacked the girl who, despite this, continued to fight but felt her mana running out. She understood that she needed to hold on until Marge returned. One of the mantises cried out in surprise, apparently not expecting such strong resistance. Shizuko, despite the pain and exhaustion, continued to fight. Her body was wounded, but her spirit was unbroken. She furiously declared that she would keep fighting because that was her role. The girl, wounded and exhausted, lay on the ground but then got up, feeling a warning from her scout's intuition. She realized they would now have a little time, and seeing a monster, she assumed it was the monster captain. Before her stood a giant mantis monster, surrounded by flames, and behind it, an entire army of smaller mantises lined up. She stood alone against this enormous army, preparing for what seemed like an unequal battle. Threatening mantises continued to emerge from the burning ruins of the village, their terrifying appearance foreshadowing new attacks. The injured girl struggled to stand, but her kin urged her to retreat, shouting that it was enough and they needed to leave. However, Shizuko was convinced that this wasn't over yet. The girl's father, with a determined expression, urged her to stop fighting to buy time for their escape. Shizuko, with pain on her face, replied that there was no escaping this powerful force's warning. At immense speed, tearing through the ground, a blade of light swept through the enemy ranks, creating powerful shockwaves. Shizuku-san, watching this, was incredibly astonished by what she saw. The attack was so fast and powerful that it seemed almost invisible. Through the dust clouds, two girls appeared. One was Miro and the other was Kusan. Shizuko, noticing her comrade's back, realized that this was the very back that always appeared when needed. Marge stood amidst the destruction, surrounded by plumes of dust. He was ready to take on the rest, and his presence inspired confidence. The young man declared that he would take care of the rest, confirming his resolve to finish what he started. Shizuko, looking at him, asked about the labyrinth, if it would be captured and if new monsters would appear. Marge replied that there would be no new monsters. Marge stated that he wouldn't let a single monster escape, as he had scanned the area with his divine eye, and the only enemies left were around the village and in the valley. The guy asked if the people were in the village behind Shizuko and her father, to which he received an affirmative answer. With approval, he told everyone to stay where they were. Marge used a powerful tornado technique, creating a vortex. This vortex lifted all the monsters into the air, scattering them in different directions and causing widespread destruction. No monster could withstand such force. Shizuko exclaimed that it was incredible as the monsters scattered in panic. The young man, with a determined expression, activated his abilities, using Subspace Rift and Dark Ice simultaneously. All the monsters were lifted into the air by this incredible power. The sky above the village was filled with monster fragments, now scattering in all directions like dust. The Spatial Ice Blade's spell was cast, a testament to the crushing power Marge had unleashed. All the monsters turned into frozen shards, reflecting the sunlight and shining as if celebrating their deliverance from misfortune. Finally, peace reigned over the village and the sky was clear of enemies. In the werewolf sanctuary, many villagers bowed in gratitude before the adventurer Marge Dono and Kodono, expressing their deep appreciation for saving the village. They had been saved from complete annihilation. Village chief Asagi introduced his wife, Kasumi. They stood before the young man and his companions, expressing their gratitude and welcoming them to the village. The village chief acknowledged that they were going through a difficult and painful time and had nothing to offer him. Nevertheless, he stated that he would do his best to repay him, and if Marge needed a concubine, he could take Shizuku. The young man firmly refused, and Shizuku, hearing this, was shocked. The girl looked downcast because of the master's answer. Marge continued, expressing confidence that Shizuku felt the same way, and then asked if she was the queen of the werewolves. The village chief explained that they were of royal blood, but he did not claim the title of king, so Shizuku would not be a princess. He then asked if they wanted to hear how this related to the restoration of the werewolf village, to which he received an affirmative answer. The village chief recounted that the werewolves once had a king, but they lost him during a war and their throne remained empty. He explained the history of their people and the reason for their current situation. Marge and his companion Ko listened attentively. Asagi pointed to the value Marge had shown, calling it a symbol of return. This was something important for their people, something that could help restore their lost position. The item, which was a treasure, marked the trinity of their throne, and now they had to bring forth a new heir. This meant that the werewolves had hope for the revival of their former glory, and Marge might play a key role in it. The elder of the werewolf village explained to the kids about their ancestral relics, the king, his consort, and the heir, which were passed down through generations. He expressed relief that they were safe, as he had been very worried they might have drowned somewhere in the swamp. Asagi then showed them the sword worn by those destined to ascend the throne, calling it the katana. It was a crucial symbol of their power and heritage, passed down from hand to hand. The village elder clarified that this sword, a type of curved blade, was forged by their ancestors, the artisans and miners who lived in the area. It was created using technology different from human methods, making it a unique and powerful artifact. Asagi emphasized that only when they possessed both the gem and the sword could they become the king of the forest. He demonstrated the importance of these two items for legitimizing power among the werewolves. The adventurer and his companion, Ko, listened to the village elder's explanation. The kids then noted that the relics should belong to Asagi and Kasumi. The werewolf elder mentioned that he had heard about Marge's aimless journey from his daughter and asked if he was looking for a place to settle down. He extended his hand. The entire werewolf village, including the elder and Shizuku, bowed before the adventurer, pleading with him to become their king. It was a moment of deep respect and hope placed upon him. The village elder, Asaga-san, looked up at the adventurer, who was sitting cross-legged. His gaze was filled with seriousness and anticipation for an answer. Marge, looking at the village elder and Shizuku, said that they had lost their composure because they had almost lost their family. He then asked if he had only just arrived there today, pointing out his recent appearance in their lives. The young man remarked that it was too reckless. When asked what he knew about the werewolf tribe, he immediately replied that power should not be used for oneself but for others. The village elder extended his hand forward, addressing Marge. He spoke of the great strength the young man had used for their tribe and his generosity in returning the jewels. At that moment, representatives of the werewolf tribe gathered, listening intently to what was happening. They expressed their reverence and respect for their saviors. Asagi explained that the tribe had always bowed before the strong and proud, regardless of race or age. He emphasized that they crown the best as their king, explaining their long-standing tradition of choosing a leader. Marge and Kosan listened carefully to these words, slightly surprised by this turn of events. The village elder continued, asserting that werewolves always followed the principle of reign without shame in heaven and on earth, and this was their sole pride. He added that in their way of life, the strong could become king, confirming that Marge, even without being a werewolf, could take this position due to his strength. Meanwhile, the master pondered what had been said, realizing that his perceptions of werewolves based on stories and rumors were mistaken. His gaze was focused as he delved into thought. In his reflections, Marge understood that werewolves were never born warriors, but worked hard every day so that their tribe could become strong. This was their way of life, and they strived for anyone who was the best warrior to become king. He realized that their strength was the result of continuous effort, not an innate gift. Asagi offered the master to accept the sword, symbolizing power, and to stay with them. He promised that the werewolves would hunt beasts and plow the land for him if he accepted their offer. Marge stared intently at the sword, considering this important decision. The master confirmed that his journey had no purpose and that Kosan had only just learned to walk. He added that he wouldn't mind settling down somewhere, perhaps hinting that this place could become their home. The werewolf elder explained that if Marge became king, he wouldn't have to worry about food. At that moment, the young man's hand reached for the sword. Kosan repeated that the master could choose to be happy. Marge, looking at her, acknowledged that she had already said this, and once again pondered her words and his decision. The girl looked at the master and said that they were originally one person, hoping he would understand her. She wanted Marge to choose his own path to happiness, implying he wasn't obligated to accept their offer if it wouldn't make him happy. The guy stated that he wasn't someone to be trusted and that he didn't know anyone present. However, he also mentioned having one question for them to get to know them better. In the middle of the square stood a wooden cage inside which a bound Miro was held, her gaze cast downwards in despair. Many werewolves gathered around the cage, watching the scene unfold. Their faces showed a mix of curiosity, anxiety, and anger, creating a tense atmosphere. Marge pointed to the girl in the cage, stating that she was one of those who had been in the labyrinth. He also accused her group of orchestrating or provoking the monster escape from the labyrinth for their own benefit. He emphasized that this was the true reason for the monster's attack on the village. The village chief and the other werewolves were shocked by what they heard. The master, pointing at the imprisoned Miro, asked the werewolves what they intended to do with her. He challenged them, demanding an answer and pushing them to make a decision. The werewolves, including Asagi, looked stunned by his question, their faces a mix of confusion and horror. Someone in the crowd shouted that she should be punished, but that it would cause a new war. Another suggested exchanging her for the village's autonomy. A third noted that the Lord wouldn't keep his promise, so she should be put to work. Others yelled that she should be killed. One of the werewolves near the cage held a dead infant and wept bitterly, exclaiming that this woman was alive while her child was not. She asked why this happened and if anything could have been done. Miro replied that she was powerless to do anything. Marge made contact with Miro and told her about the Seraphim's Blessing skill, which granted the ability to revive even after death. But Miro replied that she couldn't do anything since she was bound, and he was going to lend her a healing skill. Miro was warned that using this skill would result in the loss of two things, abilities and lifespan. Marge explained that the skill required an enormous amount of SB, and even a small portion could consume other skills. He also emphasized that revival shortened the user's lifespan, which was a serious risk. The exact number of lost decades of life was unknown, as it was a rare and unique skill. Nothing was known about it, and there was no point in testing it, making it difficult to use. It turned out that Tina had once used the same skill but never resorted to it again. The werewolves watching discussed that the woman in the cage might be sentenced to death after revival, but it all depended on Miro's actions. Miro, hearing him, replied that she would do it, expressing her readiness for any action. The master responded with approval, then, addressing the werewolves, he decisively ordered them to stop shouting and listen to him. The werewolf mother joyfully embraced her infant, her face showing relief and happiness. The baby began to make sounds, confirming its return to life, bringing joy to those present. The girl asked if anyone else had died besides the infant, to which she was told no. The werewolves, including Asagi, watched with serious faces, their expressions ranging from relief to slight concern as they realized the consequences of the revival and the decisions that lay ahead. Marge acknowledged that Miro had restored what was destroyed, but emphasized that even if a thief returned what was stolen, the crime still remained. He also stated that the woman's fate had not yet been decided. Shizuko approached the cage and said she hadn't heard anything. Miro, despite her wounds and exhaustion, looked ready to accept her fate. Asagi and his daughter watched her, preparing to hear what she would say. Shizuko explained that the woman's fate now depended on herself and what she would say. She emphasized that it would be unfair to make a decision without hearing anything from the prisoner. The werewolf standing by the cage listened attentively. Miro said that this was probably her last chance and asked if she could request something. Indignation was heard from the crowd. The girl, kneeling on the ground, asked to bring back her friends using Seraphim's blessing. Her posture expressed deep remorse and supplication. She was ready to accept any punishment as long as her companions were saved. Marge was surprised by such a request. Miro replied that they were enemies of the werewolves and together had done an unforgivable thing. Miro clasped her hands together in supplication, water dripping from her face, as she spoke about the group she had been fighting with for 6 years. Marge was surprised to hear about the 6 years and began to ponder. The young man noticed clear coincidences in the number of years. Kosan urged Marge to think for himself and decide how many things he needed to do and what his next steps should be. Miro, lying on the ground, declared that she would work hard to negotiate with the Duke and would definitely persuade her friends to help her. Miro, kneeling, pleaded to be allowed to help her comrades, even if it meant shortening her own life. Shizuko, puzzled, asked if that would happen even if she shortened her life, to which the girl in the cage responded affirmatively. Shizuko answered in the affirmative, then explained that if they didn't allow her comrades to be saved, their deaths would be the reason the enemies returned. Miro expressed her gratitude for the request. The werewolf chief's daughter stood up, glaring furiously at the assembled werewolves, and challenged anyone who desired a death sentence to step forward. Asagi stated that it was too early to use the prisoners to negotiate with the lords and inform them of the village's existence. He added that it would also be too wasteful to use soldiers for heavy labor. The village chief addressed the werewolves, expressing his opinion and urging them to accept it. He said that Miro and her team were prisoners, and they would gather resources in the labyrinth, which was his proposal for their use. Marge apparently now understood that Miro and her friends were experts in labyrinths. Asagi stated that their conclusion was that when they informed the world of the village's existence, they would negotiate for the prisoner's return. He concluded that this was their choice. Marge, remembering the sword, thought about the need to prepare for the restoration of the place and what should happen in the liberated territory. He expressed a desire to learn more about the area. He also stated that he was neither proud nor innocent, and that Shizuku was much better suited to be the village chief. The master, thinking of Shizuko, said that she was still young and lacked knowledge. Therefore, until she grew up and became worthy of the throne, he would occupy the position of temporary king. He emphasized that this was exactly what he needed. Raising his sword, Marge declared that he would be king and promised to reclaim everything that had been taken and create a new future. His decisive gesture and words inspired those present. The werewolves, bowing their heads in respect and acknowledgement, told the master that they would follow him as their king. Their postures expressed complete submission and trust in their new leader. The next day, Miro-san seemed ready for a new challenge. Kosan was nearby. The girl asked if she was planning to leave. Miro replied that she had to leave before anyone found out. She asked Kosan if she was her liberator. Ko explained that werewolf hearing and smell were sharper than humans and expressed confidence that they had all noticed. She understood that this was why no one would accuse her of trying to escape and reveal the village's secret. Miro responded with understanding. Kosan gave Miro a fang and winked cheerfully, explaining that the master had given her the poisonous fangs of a Vritra. She added that this deadly poison was also the bodily fluid of an immortal dragon, and if processed into medicine, it might be possible to restore some of her lost lifespan. The master's companion also pointed west, speaking of a city in that direction. She asked Miro to find someone who could handle the gifted fang. She also warned that if Miro went west, she would be outside the country, and if she didn't want to die, she should leave. She suggested that if this was done, there would be no one to talk to about the village's location, which was likely important for the safety of the tribe and Miro herself. Ko asked what else was needed. Miro clarified if the master could give her the ingredients for the medicine, and in response, she heard that she had a message from the master regarding this. The girl expressed her opinion that Silver God's Blade was indeed a third-rate group. Her gaze was focused and she seemed thoughtful. Ko said it was almost time to leave and wished them good luck on their journey. Then Miro added that if they ever met again, to tell Marge-san she would definitely thank him for this. Shizuko and Ko-san looked up in surprise, seeing something above them. The master and his companions recognized the object. An enormous stone golem towered above the ground, its powerful body formed from rough rocks. Its appearance inspired fear and awe as it exuded immense strength and seemed indestructible. The clay doll on the table in the room was part of a ritual where a master alchemist breathed life into it using their skill. The doll's size and appearance reflected the alchemist's abilities. Meanwhile, Ko-san and Shizuko wondered why it was there, questioning its sudden appearance and what they should do next. Marge, looking at Shizuko, ordered her to go around the village and gather everyone in one place. He told her not to get involved in any fighting, which might indicate an approaching threat he intended to face alone. Shizuko agreed and ran into the village. Suddenly, a new cloaked figure appeared, mentioning skills on credit. She stated that she had come to say hello. The master didn't understand who she was. The girl in the cloak, smiling brightly, introduced herself as the alchemist Angelina. Her appearance was unexpected, but she seemed friendly. Angelina joyfully announced that she had finally reached them, mentioning that there had been many twists and turns. The guild had confirmed her rank 2 months ago. Angelina thanked them for the warm welcome to the guild, although it seemed she had to gather friends herself since there were no more skills on credit. She asked about the number of people present and wondered if they were interested in what alchemy was when asked about the craft. The girl began to explain the essence of alchemy, defining it as a technology that brings money and a way to prove the impossible. She claimed that proving the creation of the impossible is much harder than what is possible, and that eventually, even gold can be created. Angelina enthusiastically exclaimed that she had considered it impossible, but when she tried everything herself, she was convinced otherwise. She added that the world says it made the impossible possible, but for an alchemist, that's a failure. The girl passionately explained why alchemy was so interesting, pointing to the large golem behind her. She claimed that if one wasn't lazy, a golem could be an excellent helper, and that among such golems, they were gods, but her true dream was to achieve what was impossible even with golems. One of the interlocutors said that dreams are important, while another expressed sympathy. Angelina, clearly exhausted, decided she had had enough and was going home, stating that Silver God's blade sets exceptional conditions. The interlocutor, indignant at this decision, tried to stop her, saying she couldn't just leave. The girl, not understanding the reason, asked if it was because of food. Angelina said that Ilya would take care of it later, as she eats well. The interlocutor was puzzled as to why the girl was going home. The girl, clearly confused and angry, exclaimed where the interlocutor's eyes were looking and called him a pervert, while he, in turn, explained it as a difference in height. Angelina replied that she came because of Marge, and the interlocutor, with a crazy expression, proudly declared that even without any guy, he would cut down any enemy with his unparalleled holy blade technique. The girl stated that she didn't like such things and explained her displeasure by saying that the interlocutor didn't understand the value of skills on credit, calling him a pervert. It was noted that the synergy between Marge and the golem was almost insignificant, as the master was so young and already proficient in his unique skill. Angelina, thoughtfully placing a finger to her lips, announced that she had come all this way to find what even these two couldn't do. The interlocutor still replied that Angelina should stay, and she asked if that was still relevant even if the group stopped working. With her answer, she closed the matter. The girl recalled how, at the age of 8, a guild headquarters representative visited her and drafted a contract right on a napkin. She initially refused, but he told her to come whenever she wanted, indicating her early introduction to the guild. Angelina, with a slight smile, said that her opponent's offer was also acceptable and asked if he would agree to her proposal. Pointing her finger, the girl suggested a duel, promising to join his group if he won. The man, gritting his teeth, seemed to hesitate before responding, his face a mix of determination and apprehension. Her opponent reasoned that golems could appear endlessly as long as there was earth. He also noted that he had no choice but to accept the offer, even though he couldn't properly control the holy blade. The warrior also didn't want rumors about his reputation to spread further, especially considering he was alone against a scholar. Angelina decided to start first with Mud Child. Tension was etched on her opponent's face as he watched the explosion, a clear sign of the alchemist's power. Amidst the clouds of dust, the warrior stood opposite the girl and a small golem. Angelina, looking at the golem, called him cute and declared that if he ever reincarnated as a human, he would become her husband. Her opponent exclaimed in astonishment that it was just a baby. Angelina exclaimed that it was Jerry and he wasn't a baby. Smiling, she said that golems were alive even if temporarily, and in the distant future he might reincarnate as a human. She added that then they could get married. Her opponent, expecting a more powerful foe, said that what stood before him was some kind of mockery. The warrior, holding his sword, asked his companion for a signal, to which she, holding a piece of meat, replied that she understood. Angelina remarked that Jerry was very good even like this. Then the warrior's companion asked if they were ready. The duel began. The warrior, looking at the alchemist, prepared to attack. He declared that the golem wouldn't be able to keep up with him. The small golem, leaping into the air, prepared for an activation jump, while Angelina explained that now was not the time for overconfidence. The warrior watched in amazement, crying out as the golem seemed to descend on him from above. The girl said that this was the golem's greatest feature. It reflected the skills of the person who created it. The warrior was completely surprised by this information. She continued the attack, activating jump. The golem, flying from above, looked impressive, while the man exclaimed that it was useless to use the same trick, referring to the swordsman's skills. He prepared for a strike but was stunned by the next move. Angelina, counting 1, 2, 3, watched with a smile as the warrior's legs were grabbed from underground by a golem. The man cried out and flew backward. The girl approached her opponent and asked if he surrendered, calling him a pervert, to which he replied that he wouldn't surrender to a pervert who dreamed of intimacy with a golem. Angelina, with a smile, restarted Mud Child. Her opponent was bewildered. Several large golems rose around the girl, their massive bodies made of stone. Angelina explained that she could create more than one golem with the same skill, and that skills were available to absolutely everyone. The girl, with a slight smirk, said she was sorry, but her opponent didn't want to give up and he asked her not to say that. The next step was activating the jump. The alchemist explained that the real problem was that she didn't have a husband in this world. Itta reassured her, saying there was no need to worry and that she was sure she would meet him someday. Angelina noted that Itta was a good person, and Itta said she had something for the girl. Against the backdrop of the morning city, bathed in moonlight, the warrior woke up with a loud scream, and Itta greeted him with a smile, wishing him good morning. She sat at a table, reading a book, and noted that it had been difficult to drag him there. Someone asked where Angelina was, and the reply was that she had just left town. Realizing this, the warrior exclaimed that they still had a chance to get ahead, then asked in surprise about Marge's belongings that Gordon had taken from the abyss, pointing to where they had been. Itta explained that Angelina wanted Marge's equipment, and Marge, considering it unnecessary, gave it to her. She added that they had eaten from the same plate and had become very close. The warrior was shocked and wondered why an alchemist would need equipment. Itta replied that there was a possibility she could track Marge using a golem. The warrior looked furious and immediately ordered them to head to the bell tower, which overlooked the city, and find the alchemist. On the city street beneath the towering bell tower, Angelina, looking very determined, set off and declared that they were going after Marge. Atop a rocky hill stood the master, Kisan, and the village chief. The biggest problem was food, as there weren't many edible beasts in the dungeon, the forest was small, there were few animals, and hunting wasn't enough. Marge replied that they urgently needed to provide food for everyone in the village, as the dungeon monsters had disappeared. There was hope they would find something, but it was noted that they couldn't depend on the unstable cave forever, and they weren't just looking for valuables and resources, they were also confident they would find something precious. A crowd ran towards them. Relief and joy were evident on the faces of those running due to their discovery. The good quality and quantity of what was found were noted, as well as the fact that everything went well and they didn't encounter anyone, although there were fears that everything would be ruined. The master asked if the other person was sure he was all right, while the latter joyfully exclaimed that this was his new life, given to him by a friend, a valuable continuation of his own, and he would do everything he could on his part. Asagi asked what he was talking about. Marge, raising a finger, explained that he had been conducting an experiment, though he wasn't sure if it would work. He continued by saying that prevention was necessary. The master explained that, in his opinion, if the dungeon lost its king, it would collapse. He wondered if it wouldn't be better to look for a new king. Asagi expressed confusion, believing that an S-rank dungeon king couldn't be found, but the guy replied that he had brought an egg. It was a Vritra egg. Marge explained that he had placed this egg in the deepest part of the labyrinth, and as a result, everything had stabilized. The master noted that one of the goals of their trip was to find a safe place to grow the egg, and as the egg hatched and grew, the labyrinth would become richer, and the egg itself was a dragon with the power to sustain the labyrinth. On the horizon, among the sharp mountain peaks, a small village was visible, indicating the location where white and blue dragons resided. Thus, the first step in their plan was completed. Marge mused that the size of the labyrinth depended on the king's power, and the previous king's limit was 52 floors. He was confident that with Vritra, the labyrinth would grow even larger, but if Vritra couldn't coexist with humans, he would take responsibility and reclaim the labyrinth. At this time, a group of people carrying baskets reported that they had found everything. The werewolf chief exclaimed in surprise, "It's water," as he looked at the contents of a large jug. He noted that the water quality wasn't much different from the spring in the village. The master explained that the water quality on the 4th floor was good, and the water was not far from the entrance, so he had the others look for it on the 1st floor as well. Asagi asked what the water was for, hinting that it was enough to create a wheat field. Marge raised the question of why the field wasn't yielding crops. The village chief suggested that perhaps the soil had been drained of everything necessary for growing wheat, and even if they tried to grow other crops, the soil's lifespan would only last a few years. The master continued to explain that if the same crop was grown in the same field, it would grow worse, causing constant problems. It was noted that there was little room in the village to expand the fields. Marge admitted that he was also concerned about this issue. He recalled hearing about crops that could be grown for hundreds of years even in a small area. The guy explained that it was rice and described the unique way rice is grown in paddy fields, where the water maintains a constant soil balance. Asagi thoughtfully noted that the field would require a lot of water. Originally, rice was planted in countries with abundant rainfall and water. It was pointed out that if they could maintain an endless water source, the difficulty would be resolved. The werewolf leader replied that he hadn't expected things to go this far and asked if they had any seeds, to which he was told they didn't. In the city of Kinui, Marge gave Shizuko an order, emphasizing that this was his first request to her as king and that he expected her to take it seriously. The girl respectfully acknowledged his words, confirming them. Jaren, sitting at a table, smirked contentedly, claiming that his era wasn't over yet, despite having lost a lot of money. He was confident that everything planned would happen next year, just as he was called. Shizuko was approaching him. The girl asked him why he was looking like a monster, seeing how he was filled with anger by what he saw. The man replied that she had left, implying she shouldn't be there, to which Shizuko responded that she had returned. The werewolf leader's daughter explained that she was there for Jaren to buy something from her, which caused him confusion. She then added that Marge had told her to do so. After what had happened before, Shizuko was sure he was a greedy man and wouldn't give up a single cent, even if his hand were cut off. The man retorted that only a fool spends money on unnecessary things. The girl, smiling, spoke of trusting Jaren with money matters, considering him a reliable supplier. The man sharply told her that she was impolite and no one would help her. Shizuko replied that Jaren had forgotten something. He then asked his bodyguard, Eldro, what he had told Marge during the attack. Eldro replied that he had boldly challenged Marge to try and take something from him, to which the master had said he would take everything. Jaren asked what the response had been. The muscular Eldro, standing like a small boy, replied, "Let him try if he can." Shizuko asserted that Jaren had also been present during that conversation. Marge had won. The girl explained that there was nothing wrong with taking back his belongings, and it wasn't about forgiving him, but simply that the master had entrusted the money matter specifically to him. Jaren was outraged by Eldro's outburst and said that his words were tantamount to selling him out. Shizuko continued, saying that if the merchant cooperated, he would be allowed to keep everything, but they proposed creating a business with the given money and sharing a portion of the profits. The girl, glaring angrily, warned the bald merchant that if he did anything bad again, she would come for him. Jaren, pointing a finger at her, was indignant at the idea of making a profit without any investment. Shizuko instructed the merchant to take the collected sum and deliver it to the mayor's house from where the money was supposed to go to them. The man, holding the paper in horror, exclaimed that he couldn't resist this, as even Kenui was on their side. Jaren lay on the floor lamenting his business, while the girl sat nearby and informed him that she had another task for the merchant. The man was shocked to see divine silver ore in front of him. He was asked about Renono's jewelry store, which was run by a strong woman whom precious metal traders trusted. Jaren was asked to exchange the ore for money with this woman. The bald merchant lay in his dreams with a huge pile of gold and silver coins, rejoicing over the divine silver ore. He was confident that even if he divided it, he would still make a large profit. Shizuko, frowning, asked Jaren if he would carry out the errand or not. After a brief hesitation, the merchant resolutely agreed to do it. On the hill, Shizuko happily told Marge that she had completed the task, and he praised her for a good job. Jaren had a talent for business, Reno was smart and trustworthy, and Marge had money and goods. Shizuko asked if the enemy would truly be useful, to which the master replied that it was better to capture an enemy than to kill them. He continued by saying that they were currently setting up the fields and all they had to do was wait for the results. The waterway was taken from the labyrinth and the dead wheat fields were repurposed as rice paddies. Workers were clearing fallen leaves to turn them into fertilizer for the village. The villagers of the werewolf village were working and the village landscape was changing. Shizuko, Kosan, and Marge watched, noting that everyone was working very hard and said they had to live up to expectations. Shizuko, smiling, expressed confidence that they would succeed. She spoke about how the results of their labor would be known in a month and a half. A gigantic white golem appeared, towering over 40 meters tall, its massive body made of stone. Its appearance caused an uproar and the ground to shake. Everything pointed to Angelina's arrival. Angelina descended to the group. Marge introduced himself and asked if she knew him, and the girl replied that she knew him from Arthur. The guy asked if she had been ordered to find him. The girl, spreading her arms wide, joyfully exclaimed about her academic interest. Marge was surprised. The master thought that Arthur was going to hire another alchemist after he had kicked him out, and it was unclear if that could be Angelina. Marge concluded that she had no ill intentions, despite her ability to create golems. He noted that she couldn't have simply shown up in front of him if she were plotting something bad. The master noted that a golem could be controlled remotely, with the puppeteer hiding in a safe place and attacking from afar, and that a golem without the puppeteer's instructions could only perform simple commands. The female alchemist said that Marge knew quite a lot about this, to which he replied in the negative. The villagers ran to Asagi to tell him about the giant. He asked if it was somehow related to Shizuko and asked them not to worry, saying he would talk to Marge. Instead, he asked about the situation in the village. They explained that everything was going well, but the village elder warned that going too far would be dangerous, and they needed to think about ways to maintain the core. Asagi told them to follow Shizuko's instructions. The village elder was worried that there was a lot of work and not enough manpower. Marge said that the village's food supplies were running out quite quickly. Asagi replied that the food he bought in Kinui would help stave off hunger for a while. The prisoners of war and werewolves explored the labyrinth, training for its deepest part. The master noted that the future, which would bear fruit, was not far off. Marge addressed Angelina, saying that he didn't have time for her academic interests, as he wasn't interested in them right now. The girl agreed with him. The guy didn't want to let Angelina go because she had learned that the village existed. Angelina, smiling, offered him an interesting deal. Angelina stated that she had seen the entire village and that there was a beautiful rice field here, but the number of people and the amount of work were not balanced, as the biggest problem was a labor shortage. She was confident that they would solve this problem. She noted that everything would be in exchange for safety, food, clothing and shelter, land for a workshop, materials, and clean garden beds. And then her final request was made. Angelina, beaming, asked to live with him. She was incredibly happy and full of hope. Marge, with a surprised expression, replied that he would fulfill everything except her last request. The girl started throwing a tantrum, saying that it wasn't fair. In the end, Angelina, with a joyful smile, said she was satisfied that most of her demands had been met. The girl raised her hands, explaining that her workshop was now improved and she could freely research skill borrowing and golems to her heart's content. Marge, however, informed her that her skill wasn't as convenient as she thought. Angelina, smiling, said she had already considered all the risks involved. The master, surprised, asked if she had even considered the possible risk of losing her earth golem skill and asked her to first listen to how borrowed skills work. Marge explained to the girl that if she couldn't repay her debt, she would lose her skill. He asked if she understood, and the girl looked upset. Angelina said she didn't mind losing the Earth Golem's skill to create great golems, adding that while the skill was indeed necessary to create them, production and operation were two different things. The girl explained that she was the only one who could manage golems best and was ultimately confident that the skill would be returned to her. She looked sure of her words. The deal was struck. As long as Angelina didn't leave the village territory, she would be free, and she would also receive support if needed. The girl, delighted, showed that she understood everything. 2 golems were working in the field. According to Marge, they could easily dig waterways, being twice as strong as farm horses. Angelina explained that she had finished adjusting the width of the trench and minimized losses from hydraulic pressure. Marge replied that it would be great if they could conserve the water that soaked into the ground or evaporated. The girl responded that she understood. Kosan asked Shizuko if she was sure she hadn't been followed, to which the girl replied that she had simply followed the trail with her golem dogs and had considered the possibility that someone might be tracking her. She added that it was quite easy to find the hidden village. Angelina confessed that when she heard from Ellie-chan that Ardora-san was looking for Marge, she extended her journey to 2 months. The girl explained that she had traveled day and night, crossing mountains and valleys, and even took a detour to ensure she wasn't being followed. She looked tired but determined. She used a golem instead of her legs so no one could follow her. She also added that she did this after the road became too steep, so even if she had been followed, they would have already lost sight of her. Ardor looked malicious and exclaimed Angelina's name, saying he hoped she was there. 3 weeks later, at Duke Abaca's residence, a man in an elegant suit sat in an armchair and said he had warned Ardor to be more careful. Ardor replied that as someone involved in adventurer work, no one knows what will happen tomorrow. Ardor added that a person cannot achieve anything without risking their life. His words were full of determination. Ardor asked if his interlocutor wasn't curious since he had come on official business, as he couldn't just dismiss him. However, the interlocutor added that he had previously discussed the conditions for meeting his master. The man in the strict suit reminded Ardor that he was seen as a natural disaster, and if they suddenly saw a rebellion, they should immediately inform him, and then they would meet again because he had to control everything. Ardor confirmed that he remembered that conversation. The man continued, saying he hoped Arthur would pay attention to this and asked for the witness to come forward. An elderly man with a long beard, dressed in traditional clothing, sat cross-legged on the floor. The man in the black suit stated that it was unforgivable to shackle an ordinary citizen and asked Arthur-san for a compelling reason to do so. Arthur noted that the seated man was the mayor of the in-city of Kinui, which explained his apparent calmness in an unusual situation. This information was somewhat unexpected. Arthur ordered the elderly man to repeat everything he had said to him earlier, or he threatened to take his head. The man in the suit demanded decorum, wanting to know the mayor's name and position. The mayor of Kinui, now seated at a table, held an official permit, clearly confirming his authority. He introduced himself as Vincent and said he had been mayor for 10 years. The elder noted that the werewolf had previously enjoyed Kinui. He believed she had suddenly left with travelers but later returned, having purchased a large quantity of goods. Vincent admitted that if he hadn't mentioned Marge Dono's name, this wouldn't have happened. In the elder's story, he was asked about Marge Dono, a question that clearly affected him. Arthur was visibly disturbed by this and wanted to hear the story in detail. Vincent was asked what goods they wanted to buy from him. He replied that it was food, building materials, rice, and agricultural tools, adding that there were also some weapons. He was then asked what he meant by that. Arthur, sitting in his chair, looked extremely agitated, his eyes wide open. He shouted that he could smell a werewolf uprising, foreshadowing a major rebellion. The man in the suit noted that he was meeting Vincent for the first time and informed him that his name had recently caught his attention. He went on to talk about the Burman unit, an elite group with a solid record, whose soldiers had suffered casualties in the line of duty after the incident involving Arthur-san. He added that a report had come in stating that 3 of them had died and 1 was missing. The elderly mayor, clutching the table, was visibly shaken when he was told his name had appeared in the report. The mayor exclaimed that the man in the city he trusted to destroy monsters had told him the whole truth. The elder was asked to state the name. The mayor uttered Marge-san's name. He was scared as he didn't want to reveal the name. Arthur, with a crazed expression and a wide smile, spread his arms wide, demonstrating he was right. He declared that the person behind the purchase of all these goods was none other than Marge, who had betrayed his unit and picked up the werewolf. He continued to gloat, asserting that Marge had betrayed his comrades, chosen suspicious individuals, and bought questionable goods. He believed that even as an S-rank adventurer, he would be easy prey, given the Duke's power and his own strength. The man in the suit hospitably gestured towards the majestic double doors, informing him that his master was waiting inside. Arthur eagerly anticipated the meeting. Arthur, his face contorted with rage and his gaze wild, stared straight ahead, vowing to reclaim everything that had been taken from him. He yelled for Marge to just wait, expressing his determination for revenge. Marge was informed that the rice fields had spoiled. He concluded that only 2 fields remained, and the rice field that had been divided into 7 parts was also destroyed. The werewolf guy ordered them to only select the rice that could be examined and to burn everything else. He also added that there were still good supplies left. The residents were explained that if it was a disease, it could infect other rice fields, so they needed to stop its spread. Several plots of land were already burning, and the werewolves watched with worried faces. Ko said that everything would be fine, to which Marge agreed. Shizuko then approached the master. She anxiously asked if they would be able to handle it, and the master replied affirmatively. He placed a hand on her shoulder, explaining that their job was to make sure they overcame whatever came their way. Angelina sat on the ground, holding rice straw in her hands, while the master and Shizuko talked. The girl asked why the fields were so destroyed. The alchemist girl explained that mold was the cause of the disease, and the only way to deal with it was to burn the affected crops. Even though the waterways were separated, the risk of infecting other rice fields remained high, raising the question of how to avoid the worst. Marge, with a worried expression, understood that a heavy loss had occurred, but now he knew the cause and how to combat it. Angelina confirmed that if a fungal plant grows near rice fields, it should be quickly removed as it weakens the roots of the rice plants. One of the villagers ran, stumbling through the grass. He shouted that Marge-sama was in trouble, warning of impending danger. Everyone was informed that an army, numbering over 500 people, was approaching from the east. It was added that they had a crest on their flag. Marge looked at the crest on the armor with surprise, recognizing it. Duke Abik sat majestically on a horse in luxurious clothes and a fur cloak, with Arthur beside him, and behind them many warriors lined up with banners, indicating the arrival of a powerful army. Asagi anxiously asked Marge what they should do, and he ordered Berman and the others from Far Azure to be called. He also instructed Yuzu-san and Asaga-san to prepare a temporary command post in his house, and for the rest to grab any weapons they could. The master declared that it was time to get ready, preparing for the upcoming events. The army, consisting of many armored warriors, lined up on the hilly terrain, preparing for battle. One of the soldiers expressed surprise that such a large army was in such a place, to which he was told that it was even better because the less space, the fewer enemies. Huge golems appeared on the battlefield, making the soldiers cry out in terror. Despite their fear, one soldier reassured another, saying that the commander had warned them about the possibility of golems, although he wasn't sure if these were actually them. The soldiers set up cannons, preparing for battle. Angelina expressed confidence that she could handle the situation, as it was her duty, even though it would be difficult to deal with the opponents without killing them. Armored warriors stood in formation, discussing the presence of the Duke's army. One of them suggested that the reason might be the girl they had heard about, and added that rumors had reached him about a demi-human named Shizuku who was gathering supporters to humiliate people and make them suffer. The brunette Renona, with a warlike expression, clutching her chest, furiously asked why everyone was standing there chatting. She ordered them to go and gather their things if they had so much free time. A man with a frightened face pointed into the distance. At that moment, Renono saw Shizuko and Marge, then clutched her head in astonishment. A unit of knights on horseback moved forward, led by a knight with a determined look. He announced that this was a knightly order. The knight continued, stating that they were knights of the Order of the White Phoenix, the fastest unit among the 7 knightly orders. He spoke these words with a confident expression. He had received a message about a demi-human uprising in this town. He explained that the Knights of the Order of the White Phoenix are known for their bravery and are true demi-human hunters, directly controlled by the capital. The residents, smiling, said that they had come to save them. Jaren called the others simply howling dogs and expressed the opinion that there was no need to waste their precious time coming here. Jaren stated that he didn't want any trouble as he needed to make a profit and that he was only following Shizuko's original instructions. Rinono tried to stop him. The Knight of the Order noted that all who conspired with demi-humans would face punishment. Bloodstains were visible on the ground, and next to them lay Jaren's hand, severed by the sword of the knight who sat on horseback. Rinono rushed over to Jaren. The knight stated that they were demi-humans, different beings. The girl was furious and exclaimed that there was no need to butcher a person just because they had the face of a monster. The knight declared that humans and demi-humans were not equal in the eyes of the law, and that demi-humans wouldn't hesitate for a moment to kill humans as their behavior was detrimental to humanity, and history had proven this. He further explained that these people were difficult to understand, but nonetheless they should be loved as humans. He added that these were foolish citizens who couldn't distinguish demi-humans from others and treated them like humans. Rinono angrily asked if he was going to kill him just because he treated them as humans. Warriors with spears and halberds stood in formation, preparing for the city's cleanup. One of the knights, a representative of the 36 knights, announced that they were proceeding with the cleanup of this city to ensure that people didn't trust non-humans and would never become the cause of a tragedy. The Knight of the Order said that afterward, prayers would be offered for them so they would learn to distinguish humans from them. Shizuko came to the rescue, extending her hand forward, and her mana activity level was 81,937. Behind her, Rinono and Jaren watched her actions with astonishment.